Moreover, Yilan still couldn't determine if it was controlled by the ancient god's touch. Are you so obedient to your main god? Yilan asked curiously. Even if he just left, so miserably? Sulimo was indeed speechless for a moment. This was also the point he hadn't quite figured out yet. Who was this guy? Why did his main god just run away upon seeing him? I am indeed surprised by the power you possess. Sulimo said hesitantly, but this doesn't affect anything. The main god has greater things that require preserving power. What things? Yilan narrowed his eyes. That cannot be said. Yilan sighed. You're making things very difficult for me. You should understand, right? I won't tolerate something I don't know about brewing in the current Radiant City. If you don't tell me, then your schemes will only be destroyed, there's no other path. Sulimo opened his mouth, then gritted his teeth, looking determined not to speak. All right. Yilan was truly a bit annoyed, so the simplest way to determine the other party's stance appeared. I've withdrawn my power now. Yilan said, retracting the emanating dark blue-gray mist, you can now ask it whether to tell me or not. If you don't tell me, then you're an enemy. Because I believe as long as the reason is reasonable, I won't stop you. Sulimo looked deeply at Yilan, then closed his eyes, seemingly beginning to pray. Not long after, he opened his eyes again. I promise you, it's really just an extra layer of insurance. He said, if the ancient god's touch erupts in Radiant City, he will sacrifice himself. To lock the ancient god's touch and Radiant City together, locking them here. If the Yue god and the Rotten god return in time, they will be able to save Radiant City and stop the ancient god's touch. If they don't return in time, only Radiant City will be destroyed by the ancient god's touch, and it won't affect the entire wasteland. Yilan raised an eyebrow. Really? So noble? His name? His revered name is Panshur's Lock. Yilan frowned slightly. A bit familiar, but he hadn't heard of it. Maintaining a calm expression, Yilan secretly asked Eternal Nightmare. Nightmare, do you remember? Yes. Eternal Nightmare nodded blankly. 006. Your right-hand man. Yilan? What the heck? My right-hand man? Yes. Yilan hesitated to speak. So, he really ended up investigating himself, huh? What was it doing during the 60 years I wasn't in the wasteland? I don't know. Eternal Nightmare shook his head repeatedly. No one was managing it either. Everyone probably thought you had other arrangements, right? Yilan hesitated to speak, like now? Eternal Nightmare, you know me, I'm always sleeping. Boom! Just then, the entire underground chamber shook. Accompanied by a loud bang from above, a rolling heat wave seemed to come from the passage, causing a subtle sweat. Under attack? Yilan frowned, looking at Sulimo. Sulimo was also very confused by the current situation, his expression extremely grim. I'm afraid so. His eyes flickered, and Yilan glanced at the time. An hour had passed, and there wasn't much time left until the agreed-upon moment. Yilan pondered for a moment, deciding not to pursue his right-hand man for now. He had already resolved to conduct a special investigation on himself after Radiant City was over, but currently, Yilan indeed didn't have enough time to thoroughly investigate a power that might be his own. Since I've already stumbled upon it. Yilan pointed to the underground chamber. What are your plans? Whether or not you stumbled upon us, I won't be going to the Radiant Disk again. Sulimo's answer was both firm and honest. Staring deeply into his eyes for a moment, Yilan activated psychological invisibility. Composing himself, Sulimo alone walked out of the secret passage. As soon as he stepped out, Sulimo froze for a moment. Sitting in his study was a man in his 40s, exuding righteousness, with thick eyebrows that conveyed arrogance and immense authority. He sat on the desk in the study, sipping an aged fine wine from the bookshelf, as if he had never noticed the secret passage. A small elite team from the Twilight God cult followed behind him, looking at Sulimo, who had emerged from the secret passage, with considerable hostility and menacing gazes. Sulimo didn't speak immediately, only frowned and glanced out the window. In the courtyard, the Twilight God cult's people had already taken over the entire area. His own people lay on the ground, but no casualties were found. Sulimo's voice was extremely cold, his tone very angry. Even if he wasn't truly very angry, he had to feign extreme anger. What is the meaning of this, Twilight God cult? What meaning? The authoritative middle-aged man at the desk didn't look up or continue to sip his wine. He toyed with the cup in his hand and spoke indifferently. Having already agreed with our Twilight God cult, yet colluding with the other three families, plotting to obstruct, hinder, and even secretly seize the evil god's product, I'll call it that for now, and having already succeeded. Compared to the other three families, you directly betrayed us. Do you still need to ask me what I mean? Sulimo's expression changed drastically. Why was he so certain? Why did he seem to know everything? I don't understand what you're talking about. I believe our cooperation has been very pleasant. The middle-aged Grand Inquisitor of the Twilight God cult smiled. Then why don't Master Su take me to that flying disc in the sky to see for yourself, how about it? Sulimo's face was ashen. Then you should also lead your team there, not to Su family. The middle-aged Grand Inquisitor's smile became even more playful. Really? Do you really wish for me to lead a team over there? The imposing Sulimo suddenly fell silent. Never mind, I'm not here to hold you accountable, I'm here to see an old friend. After a moment, the middle-aged Grand Inquisitor waved his hand. You may leave. Sulimo was completely stunned. Not looking for me? Then who else is here? Old friend? The middle-aged Grand Inquisitor waved his hand again, this time at the team behind him. You all leave too. The captain of the elite squad's expression changed, and he spoke urgently. You are the Grand Inquisitor, you cannot take any risks at this time. We must protect you throughout. Ha! The Grand Inquisitor chuckled, in front of certain existences, you cannot protect my safety. If you truly care about my safety, then leave quickly. Don't be too impolite and offend someone. The Twilight God cult squad members all looked at each other. The Grand Inquisitor's words made them speculate, but not much. As the people in the room dispersed, Yilan glanced at the middle-aged man, chuckling and shaking his head. He pulled over a chair, sat in front of him, and deactivated psychological invisibility. Xia Tianan. Perfection. Hello, we meet again. Although Xia Tianan displayed a calm, unruffled, and polite smile, one could sense a hint of tension. Yilan sighed softly, still with a touch of helplessness. How did you find me? Seeing Yilan speak to him like an ordinary person, Xia Tianan also quietly breathed a sigh of relief, revealing a steady smile. Though I can't compare to you, I am still one of the few humans in the entire wasteland with the most experience handling anomalous events. In Sewage Town, you used this ability objects to move behind me. When we met a second time, there's no reason I wouldn't recognize you. He let out a soft sigh, a feeling of things having changed. To be honest, too much time has passed, and my impression of you is a bit blurry, but you haven't changed at all. Yilan nodded slightly, acknowledging his explanation. This was also one of the drawbacks of the crystal ball and ability objects. If it was seen through once by the same person, it would be much easier to detect the second time. For example, the first time Qingyu used it, she was almost touching his back on his motorcycle, and it still took a long time to notice her. But after that, if Qingyu tried to use psychological invisibility on him again, he would definitely be able to see through it easily. Why are you here? Yilan asked directly, appearing very relaxed. If any other Twilight God cult leader were sitting there, they might have reacted irrationally towards him, but Xia Tianan, who personally participated in the Battle of Sewage Town 30 years ago, would not. After all, the scene of him displaying his power was indeed quite shocking. I have to be here. Xia Tianan had no intention of avoiding the question. You've seen how many people from our Twilight God cult have come this time. Besides me, the Grand Inquisitor, there is no one else with the authority to command such a large force, enough to launch the cleanse. When the main god is not present, we must, and only we can, handle this. Xia Qianan made no attempt to hide the fact that Pure Remnant's son was currently not in the wasteland. Perhaps in his view, Yilan surely knew this better than he did. What about the promised ark? Xia Qianan gave a bitter smile. The main god issued a divine revelation, stating that without an anomaly of his level to hold the line, we should not bring any other anomalies when dealing with ancient gods' touch. Otherwise, they might be exploited and controlled to fight against us. It's better for us to deploy all of our human strength directly. He explained. The main god once listed 5 divine names for us, circulated only among successive popes and grand inquisitors, who are main gods as powerful as him. But unfortunately, to this day, we only understand our main god and the rotten god. Yilan seemed thoughtful. 001 to 005, then? So, before entering the shadow of the past, the Twilight God cult finally agreed to deploy the promised ark because they received instructions from the third one? After all, he was here. Xia Qianan finally asked the question he had been holding in. Actually, I came specifically to ask you. Why are you here? Yilan tapped his fingers lightly on the table, temporarily avoiding his question. You don't seem worried that I might be an enemy? The fact that Xia Qianan could find him here indicated that their intelligence network must have already seen him helping the 4 great families. You are someone who can sit and chat with the main god and the rotten god. I'm sorry, I'm actually not sure if you are human. Yilan's mouth twitched slightly. If I'm not human, then what am I? Xia Qianan was a bit embarrassed by the question, then said. Based on my judgment, you are either one of the 5 main gods that the main god mentioned, or an emissary of one of those 5, representing his will. The situation in Radiant City is complex. Since you are here, I wanted to pay a visit and ask about your, or the god behind you's, stance. Yilan raised an eyebrow slightly. He's quite good at guessing, isn't he? But then again, 30 years ago, the commotion he caused was already quite big, without any restraint. But who would have thought that wasn't an illusion, but truly the past? Yilan tapped his fingers on the table, pondering the matter. Ask away, what do you want to know? Xia Qianan breathed a sigh of relief. The other party didn't deny it, which was the best possible outcome. Since the main god had told them those 5 names, even if they might be enemies, it at least meant that as long as they faced ancient gods' touch, the stance of these 5 powerful gods and their forces would be consistent. I want to know what you intend to do. Does the main god know? Have you reached some agreement with the main god, or? You don't need to guess wildly. Yilan interrupted him. He doesn't know I'm here, but that's actually not important. Whether he knows or not, he wouldn't stop me. Xia Qianan's expression became somewhat troubled. I thought you had already thought it through clearly, Yilan couldn't help but remind Xia Qianan. He suddenly realized that if the Twilight God cult could obey his command at this moment, it would play a very large, very crucial role. A significant role that could resolve all his worries. Your main god giving you those 5 divine names, the meaning is very clear, isn't it? If he cannot free himself, and the power of ancient gods' touch emerges uncontrollably, then any one of those 5 gods has the right to lead the development and handling of that area. Even if the rotten god were here, you would temporarily be on the same front, wouldn't you? Though. Yilan paused, a strange smile on his face. If the rotten god were here, even if you wanted to help, he might not even bother with you? Xia Qianan. So, let go of your psychological burden. Right now, I do need you to do some things for me. Yilan made a concluding statement. Now it's your turn to give me an answer. Have you decided? Xia Qianan took a deep breath, recalled various events from the Sewage Town period, and finally made his decision. The main god will always return. Until he issues a clearly different divine revelation, everyone from the Twilight God cult here will obey your command. Yilan nodded slightly. It seems this truly was a pleasant surprise. Good. The things I need you to do temporarily don't need to be done in Radiant City. The only thing you need to do now is to immediately take everyone out of Radiant City, and regarding the Radiant Disk. Oh, that thing above our heads. Don't investigate it, pretend not to know. Pay attention to my wording, it's pretend not to know, and let the 4 great families of Radiant City take over. Let them take over? Xia Tianan almost jumped up. Not out of doubt, but with a look of disbelief, is that really possible? They are all just ordinary people. Yilan chuckled softly and patted his shoulder. Your ideal is to save the world, right? Xia Tianan was puzzled. Of course. Then, if you had to choose between preserving a past and destroying a future, or preserving both the past and the future, how would you choose? Yilan himself found it a bit awkward to say, and for a moment realized that Li Zhixin's previous incorrect description was actually quite good. Let me put it another way, if you could save 2 worlds, would you choose to save one, or save 2? Of course, I'd save 2 worlds. Xia Tianan looked utterly confused, but where are there 2 worlds? Seeing his bewildered expression, Yilan decided not to explain in detail. You don't need to understand. When your main god returns and asks, just convey my question to him. Yilan finally smiled, a relaxed smile he hadn't worn in a long time. You know, I've been very unhappy lately, always feeling a sense of guilt, like I'm a bad person, even though what I'm doing is perfectly correct. But the problem is, doing this clearly carries hidden dangers that I can't monitor or deal with in time, and I don't know if they will lead to many bad things happening. I often doubt and waver because I don't want to do this. But history cannot be changed, otherwise everything in the future, everything I cherish around me, would all be gone. Until I saw you. Yilan smiled. If we cooperate at this moment, then this matter will finally be completely perfected. Backhand. Xia Tianan grew increasingly bewildered. He had to admit, he didn't understand. All he could do was diligently memorize everything and report it to his main god later. First point. Yilan held up his first finger. The 4 great families of Radiant City currently have unstable foundations, a mixed workforce, and a chaotic structure. You are to immediately dispatch elites, have them go undercover, join the 4 great families, and become long-term secret agents for the Twilight God. Cult. The secrecy level for these individuals is the highest. You are fully responsible for them. You may inform your main god, and you can even choose not to inform the Pope. Xia Tianan nodded. This was quite easy to understand. What are their tasks? Closely, and always secretly, monitor the 4 great families' research. Yilan said, you can adjust your arrangements at any time, but remember. Your task is not to interrupt or prevent, but to restrict in certain situations. Can you give an example? Xia Tianan listened very intently. I'll give an example. Yilan thought for a moment. They suddenly decide to arrest innocent ordinary people for human experimentation. Xia Tianan's expression became serious. This is absolutely intolerable. But didn't you just say not to interrupt or prevent? Yes, but you can report them, forcing them to be legitimate. Yilan nodded. You don't need to discover that they are researching the ancient God's touch, but you can simply discover that they are indiscriminately arresting people. Then, strongly rescue the people, publicly condemn it across the entire wasteland, and conduct an extremely high-pressure investigation. If they don't want to be exposed, they won't dare to harbor such crooked ideas again. Xia Tianan? In short, anything that disregards human ethics is absolutely not allowed. Yilan concluded. Xia Tianan nodded. This requirement was not difficult, he would do the same. Second point, independently assess threats and prevent adverse effects from spreading across the entire wasteland. Yilan sighed, for example, gene enhancement will definitely be introduced to the entire wasteland in the future, becoming a widespread and popular choice for most people to improve themselves. The first few batches of their enhancement serums won't have any problems and will have their own significance for post-apocalyptic humans. But as time goes on, some will be recklessly released. In short, your task is to absolutely prevent those problematic serums from being widely promoted and to absolutely prevent an uncontrollable and uncontainable spread in the wasteland. After a long while, Xiaotianan nodded. I remember. I will complete the arrangements very quickly. At least until the main god issues new, different instructions, I will absolutely implement your requirements. Yilan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He knew it, he would always do something. History cannot be changed, but he also believed he wouldn't do nothing to prevent it. And as long as he and the Twilight God cult reached an agreement at this moment, with the Twilight God cult providing support for the next 30 years, given their strength and influence, all his worries and future troubles could be ensured not to happen. Then we will withdraw our troops, and then. How do we contact you? Xia Tianan asked. No need to contact me, you won't be able to reach me. Yilan waved his hand, preparing to go to the Radiant Disk to witness history one last time. And check the status of the ancient god's touch, when he suddenly paused, a thought stirring in his mind. The final loop, it seemed, finally had an answer. Is there any ability objects that can obscure memories for a period of time working for you? Or obscure the memories of a portion of people? Xia Tianan pondered. You mean Radiant City? Yilan nodded. This disaster. Let it be forgotten if it should be. More and more people are paying attention here. If left unchecked, not only will all secrets be dug up prematurely, but Radiant City will also never know peace. Given Radiant City's current strength, if one team brings ability objects to wander around today, and another team comes to explore tomorrow, how can Radiant City develop? Xia Tianan strongly agreed with Yilan's idea. You're absolutely right. No wonder you're the main god's good friend, your philosophy truly aligns with our Twilight's. Supernatural phenomena should be resolved by supernatural forces. The less contact with ordinary people, the better. Forgetting is best, otherwise it only increases panic and leads to endless worry. Yilan interrupted his exposition of the philosophy. So, you can do it? Of course. Xia Tianan said with certainty, not only that, but in fact, many historically tragic and extremely detrimental abnormal disaster events have been handled this way by our Twilight God cult. You know, there are too many gods with strange abilities who don't care about human order. Our elite squads are usually equipped with the ability objects bestowed by that anomaly. Of course, for Radiant City's scale, that anomaly's true body would probably have to descend. Yilan nodded and stood up. Everything that needed to be discussed was discussed, and all necessary preparations were made. He was about to leave. In that case, then. Wait, I have a question. Xia Tianan gritted his teeth, finally asking the question that had been weighing on his mind. It's just a personal matter. You can listen, you don't have to answer. Yilan was intrigued. Speak? 30 years ago, in Sewage Town, there was a girl who acted with you. Was she from our Twilight God cult? Yilan paused, remembering he was talking about Xia Qingyu, and his expression became slightly odd for a moment. Yes. Who is she? Xia Tianan asked eagerly. To be honest, my authority has grown higher and higher over the years. I've seen the Twilight God cult's open and secret files, but there's absolutely no record of someone of that strength and age existing. In 30 years, I haven't seen her appear either. Yet I feel a strange sense of closeness and trust towards her. I'm truly puzzled, I don't know. Yilan's lips twitched, and he smiled faintly, choosing to be the enigma he most enjoyed being. The time has not yet come. In a few more years, you will see her. Xia Tianan seemed to understand, and yet seemed to completely misunderstand. Anything else? Yilan asked. After thinking for a moment, Xia Tianan nodded. Yes. Tell me. That god who can obscure memories. The main god has given strict orders that it will only act if personally instructed by him. Xia Tianan said cautiously, also probing, if you could present some kind of token, perhaps it could ensure that he will definitely act? Yilan chuckled softly, glanced at the time, and without further delay, walked out. You can tell him my name is Yilan. Surprise. Pushing open the study door and heading downstairs, when Yilan arrived in the courtyard, no one from the Twilight God cult attempted to restrict him. Clearly having received instructions from Xia Tianan, Yilan found Su Limo and asked, under what circumstances will the Panshur's lock plan be triggered? As long as the ancient god's touch hasn't truly been dealt with by the Twilight God cult, but has merely hidden its power, Su Limo said, when it wants to do something, that's when my Lord God will act. Yilan nodded. Boom! Suddenly, a deafening roar made the ground tremble. Yilan turned around in shock. A massive fireball, a mushroom cloud rising. He had seen it too many times. Nuclear explosion. Directly in Radiant City. That location. Yilan's brows furrowed tightly. Zhao Mansion? Su Limo was incredulous. Damn. 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 The Zhao Mansion had completely become a sea of flames, with several surrounding streets also suffering varying degrees of damage. Yilan was rushing over with the first search and rescue team dispatched by Su Limo. Upon arrival, the teams from the Li and Bai families had already arrived and begun rescue operations. Outside the Zhao Mansion, Li Zhixin was cursing wildly, pacing back and forth. What's going on? Why are you here? A hand suddenly rested on Li Zhixin's shoulder. He was slightly stunned and turned his head, a fierce expression on his face. Go in and save people. Don't talk to me. He roared with satisfaction, but when he clearly saw the face of the person who had patted his shoulder, he couldn't help but shiver. Oh. It's you, buddy. Yilan's brows were tightly furrowed. Why did you come down? Didn't I tell you to stay on the radiant disk? Ah. Li Zhixin scratched his head awkwardly. Plans can't keep up with changes, you know. We decided to go back to our own homes to make arrangements ourselves, including drafting a list of research teams and so on. Sai, didn't old Bai report it when you left, saying he might have to come down? I remember I said at least one of you should stay up there, Yilan said, enunciating each word. Where are those two now? Li Zhixin. Don't tell me. Yilan pointed to the ruins of the Zhao Mansion behind him, then to the smoke and raging inferno within. They're in there? Li Zhixin. Yilan. He couldn't hold it in. He really couldn't. Why do they have to court death? Isn't it good to be alive? This is. Are they still alive? I don't know. Li Zhixin explained frantically. Old Zhao was there from the beginning, and old Bai went in with a team to rescue. Old Bai and I just arrived. Yilan narrowed his eyes. Why didn't you go? If Bai Zhuahai hadn't arrived later and gone in for the rescue, Yilan would have truly suspected that Li Zhixin wanted to wipe them both out for some unknown reason. Anyway, decades later, in the dynasty, he did the same thing. Wait. Something's wrong. Li Zhixin and the dynasty didn't know him. A chill, like an electric current, ran through Yilan's entire body. Was his judgment wrong? Was this not real history? No, that's not right. There's another possibility. Li Zhixin and the dynasty wasn't Li Zhixin. Old Bai said we couldn't all be wiped out, so he went in first to search and investigate the situation, and I'm responsible for guarding the perimeter. Li Zhixin explained honestly, then suddenly noticed Yilan's expression was off. What's wrong? Yilan collected his thoughts and gave him a deep look. Nothing, you just guard here, I'll go take a look. With that, Yilan's gaze swept over the supplies next to Li Zhixin. He grabbed a gas mask and walked directly into the inferno, filled with radiation and smoke. Li Zhixin watched Yilan leave in shock, stunned for a long time, finally realizing what felt off. Buddy! Wear a protective suit. However, Yilan had already gone far. Hot, so hot. Racing at full speed through the sea of flames, a scorching sensation swept over his entire body. Yilan was not slowed by the stinging pain, instead, a faint spiritual energy covered his whole body, activating rapid self-healing. Even though he had the presence of mind to talk to Li Jixing just now, that was only to understand the situation here. In reality, he was truly anxious. None of these 4 people could die. Bang bang bang. Da-day-day-day. Yilan didn't know which way to go until he heard gunshots from the sea of flames, and Yilan immediately had a direction. Before long, in a relatively open ruin, 2 teams were engaged in a fierce firefight. Both sides were dressed similarly, gas masks, full-body heat-resistant suits, insulated gloves. And actually, it wasn't a very intense firefight. Those heat-resistant suits were as bulky as spacesuits, which was why Yilan didn't bother wearing. 1. It would have wasted too much time. Furthermore, in such high temperatures and complex conditions, firearms were prone to various sudden malfunctions and problems. Bang! Yilan quickly distinguished which side was the Bai family's rescue team. He fired his grappling hook, pulling over a soldier whose cover had been destroyed. The man suddenly flew into the air, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a person in front of him. He was very panicked, drew his revolver, and was about to fire, but Yilan disarmed him directly. Don't panic, it's me. Yilan grabbed the man's head, making him look at him, and got straight to the point. Where is Bai Zhuahai? The man was indeed stunned for a moment. After all, during the operations of the past 2 days, not many of the 4 great families didn't recognize Yilan. It's you! The man said frantically, we've isolated a firebreak nearby and already moved the family head there. Yilan showed no joy at having found his target, his brows twisted into a knot. Moved him? Yes. The man looked worried. He was shot a few times just now by the enemy and is on the verge of death. Yilan gritted his teeth. On the verge of death. Who are the enemies? Who are you fighting? I don't know. That single sentence almost made Yilan lose his composure, but then he added some reasoning. The family head speculates they are rebels from the Zhao family. Rebels? Yilan was stunned for a moment. So, the current situation is just a power struggle between humans? Yes, the Zhao family head's younger brother was at odds with him, ambitious, and probably suddenly decided to launch an attack. Yilan felt a brief moment of confusion. Really? In such a tumultuous time, a key figure like Zhao Ganghuang assassinated, his life hanging in the balance, just because of a human infighting? Bang! A bullet almost grazed Yilan's scalp. Yilan turned his head in annoyance and swept with his revolver. Bang 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 bang. Yilan shot with unhurried ease. After nearly half a minute, all the enemies lay on the ground, none escaping. No one died, all were severely wounded. The Bai family's rescue team watched Yilan in shock, swallowing hard. This is too outrageous. In this vast fire and smoke, everyone's vision was blurry, yet he shot so accurately? One shot, one hit? Even more outrageous was Yilan himself. Truly, besides a mask, he wasn't wearing any protective gear. The raging inferno constantly burned Yilan, only for him to infinitely self-heal, his appearance quite ferocious. You immediately take me to the firebreak, and the others drag these rebels, all of them, and interrogate them separately. Yes. Yes. The Bai family's team immediately cleared the scene, while the person Yilan had initially rescued rushed into the so-called firebreak. A relatively secluded house in a mansion, at a certain distance from the surrounding houses. It had a small inner courtyard, and all flammable materials like weeds around it had been completely cleared, leaving only scorched earth. At the same time, there was also a Bai family soldier with a high-pressure water gun monitoring all directions, constantly preventing any sudden combustion due to the high temperatures. Cough, cough. Accompanied by weak groans and faint moans, Yilan walked over. A man covered in blood lay there, and a soldier was performing very crude bandaging on him. Beside him were 2 recently extracted bullets. Bai Zhuahai. How is he? Yilan didn't speak to him directly but asked the military doctor beside him. The military doctor, seeing it was Yilan, answered without any hesitation. It's very serious, and most importantly, the radiation here is severe. If we don't leave quickly. Yilan looked directly at Bai Zhuahai. Why haven't you evacuated from here yet? Yilan initially guessed that Bai Zhuahai would give him an answer about being loyal and not leaving until Zhao Ganghuang was found, but he gave an answer that surprised Yilan. Now, not yet. Everything that had happened had completely stripped away his youthful naivety, filling him with a sense of maturity. Something big has happened. I need to decide how to tell the outside before I can leave. Yilan had a very bad feeling. What is it? It's good that you and I can discuss it, over there. After a moment of hesitation, Bai Zhuahai pointed to a door. Go inside and look at the third one from the front. I haven't dared let my subordinates see it, it's mixed in with the others. Yilan said nothing and strode towards the room Bai Zhuahai had indicated. The moment he opened it, Yilan frowned. Corpses, charred corpses. Yilan suppressed his physical discomfort, counted to the third charred corpse, and gently turned it over. Then, he froze. For the first time during the entire shadow of the past operation, his whole body stiffened. Zhao Ganghuang. Zhao Ganghuang was dead. Ordinary. How could he be dead? How did he just die? Arthur Luocho in history was clearly alive. So what's going on? Did I fail? Has history been changed? Yilan's face was very, very, very ugly. What to do now? What would happen if history was rewritten? Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? What will happen if history is changed? Su Lezhang, the four young masters, Arthur Luocho, Xiao Qingyu, Xiao Manman, Lin Jiao, Bai Taodao, what will happen to all these people who will appear in the future? Can I still go back? Don't panic, boss, I think there's another possibility. Eternal Nightmare suddenly spoke, for example. In real history, Zhao Ganghuang was already dead. What you saw later was just an imposter. Yilan was indeed stunned for a moment. Indeed, such a possibility exists. So who was the Zhao Ganghuang I saw? And who the hell was Zhao Taihui? Returning from the room, Yilan closed the door. As his gaze met Bai Zhuahai's, neither of them spoke, lost in their own troubles. More and more people gathered in the room, including a large number of captives. The Bai family's team had already begun interrogations, and that's what Yilan was waiting for. Before long, someone came to report to Bai Zhuahai. However, Bai Zhuahai was in such a poor state, and Yilan was sitting beside him. The person, receiving a signal from Bai Zhuahai's eyes, reported directly to Yilan. It has been thoroughly interrogated, and it is indeed an internal power struggle within the Zhao family. Zhao Ganghuang's second brother was dissatisfied with his succession to the family head position, but lacked strength and manpower. From the time Zhao Ganghuang took office, he had always been involved with our other three families. Zhao Ganghuang's second brother didn't want to offend us and had been waiting for an opportunity. Until today, Zhao Ganghuang returned to the mansion alone, with all the elite masters gathered. Zhao Ganghuang's second brother assembled all the armed forces he controlled and launched nearly 10 Yuan Gungungs at the Zhao mansion in one go. These people were sent in by Zhao Ganghuang's second brother to ensure Zhao Ganghuang's death. Yilan didn't comment on anything, turning to look at Bai Zhuahai. Is this reasonable? Bai Zhuahai was silent for a moment, then nodded. Reasonable. There were indeed such problems internally, but after Zhao Ganghuang took office, I thought the overall situation was settled, and never expected it to be so extreme. Yilan was non-committal, got up, and walked towards the captive area. Everyone out, I need to investigate. The Bai family members all withdrew. Yilan scanned the group of people with his gaze and spoke to Eternal Nightmare. Let them sleep, dream of what happened to them recently, and I'll look at them one by one. Oh, that's simple. Thump! Dozens of captives fell to the ground, falling into a synchronized slumber. Yilan slightly closed his eyes and entered the dreamland. Dozens of minutes later. Yilan slowly opened his eyes, looking complexly at the still sleeping captives. There was no conspiracy, no accident, no twist, and no behind-the-scenes manipulation or instigation from any mastermind. It was indeed just a family internal struggle for the position of family head, finally erupting after a period of forbearance. Yilan didn't know what to say for a moment. Everyone was plotting some earth-shattering event. Devising some heaven-defying plan. Enduring how many dangers from the anomalous side. But he just died like that. He died in a simple, ordinary family feud. There was no involvement from the two great divine churches, no manipulation from the ancient god's touch, no behind-the-scenes mastermind from any anomalous side. He died for such a simple reason, he died such an ordinary death, that was all. Everyone's goals were too grand, their enemies too powerful. Yilan had been helping them guard against powerful enemies like the ancient god's touch, so much so that he had forgotten. They were all just people. They were all just ordinary people now. Creak. Pushing open the door, Yilan sat down beside Bai Zhuahai. What are your plans? Bai Zhuahai shook his head. That's precisely why I haven't left yet. He sighed, I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm a bit confused right now, but I believe it shouldn't be made public. Why can't it be made public? Yilan didn't quite understand his concerns. Because we've already divided the research projects. Bai Zhuahai sighed, these all must be conducted in secret. If Zhao Gangawang's death is announced now, we don't know if the researchers from the Zhao family will have other ideas. Why not just absorb them? Yilan said, can't your three families absorb them? It's difficult. Bai Zhuahai shook his head, most can be absorbed, but the problem is that it could be a small part of anyone. We have to guard against Zhao Gangawang's second brother knowing, guard against the ancient god's touch, guard against the Twilight God cult, keep it secret from the entire city, there's too much to guard against. With so many people, there are always one or two who, for various reasons, might want to go elsewhere. Let alone one leaving, even if one is in the enemy camp with their heart elsewhere and then seizes an opportunity to leave, it would be enough to expose all of us. Yilan frowned. What about directly disbanding them and kicking them out, and your three families do the research? Bai Zhuahai was silent for a moment. But their research team has already gone up. Huh? Yilan was stunned for a moment, his expression gradually turning cold. You all came down, but you let the research team go up by themselves? Yes. All the work was already divided, so didn't that mean research had already begun? Are you guarding against me? Bai Zhuahai's expression was slightly awkward, but he didn't completely deny it. It's not really guarding, just a little bit of selfishness. After all, we don't know your intentions, do we? Bai Zhuahai tried hard to explain. I hope it won't create a rift between us. We just needed an absolutely familiar environment to discuss the division of labor, without having to worry about your stance, that's all. We are not your opponents, whenever you want to know, you can still get the answers. You still don't understand, this is a small matter. I don't, not in the least, care if you trust me. Yilan was already a bit annoyed. I remember I already said it very clearly, that you should leave people up there. Can you tell me why you all came down? Why did only the research team go up? Bai Zhuahai didn't expect Yilan to be most concerned about this and couldn't help but speak. Didn't I tell you, and old Zhao had to come down to check. Old Zhao actually came down to handle family matters, otherwise, it would be difficult to mobilize people, and I was helping him coordinate. Then why did Li Zixin come down? Bai Zhuahai hesitated to speak. He said he was scared up there and wanted to come down with us. Yilan. He's scared of what? Damn it. Taking a deep breath, Yilan rubbed his temples. If Eternal Nightmare's conjecture was correct, then no one must ever know that Zhao Ganghuang was dead. Announce to the public that Zhao Ganghuang is severely injured and needs emergency treatment. In a moment, have people carry him out, and once he's out, put him directly into a car and drive off immediately, prohibiting any communication with anyone. Yilan looked at Bai Zhuahai. You will also be carried up with him, partly for treatment, and partly to ensure this matter remains top secret. Radiant Disc, you don't need to go up for now. Bai Zhuahai's eyes flickered, hearing a different meaning. You mean, don't let me tell Li Zhixin? Whoosh! Bang! Outside the fiercely burning Zhao mansion, high-pressure water cannons cleared the way, and a large contingent of people rushed out of the sea of fire. Among them, the fastest 4 people carried 2 injured individuals, swiftly rushing onto a small truck. The truck loaded the people and started the engine in one swift motion, speeding away as if its rear was on fire. Hey! Li Zhixin wanted to quickly go forward and see, but he saw Yilan, who had also come out and was walking towards him. After a very quick hesitation, he decided to find Yilan first. Buddy! What's the situation? Where's old Bai? Yilan imperceptibly scanned him from head to toe, then rolled his eyes. Didn't they just leave? All severely injured, carried away. All severely injured? Li Zhixin had a bitter expression. Then who will set things up there later? My mind doesn't work well. Then it's a good chance for you to practice more, otherwise how will you be the family head? Yilan smiled and turned to leave. Let's go, we'll go. Up. I still need to check the status of the ancient god's touch. Ah. Now. Li Zhixin looked bewildered. Wait. I'll go call Su Limo. He said he's not going. Yilan looked back at him. Just the 2 of us. If you really don't want to go, I can go by myself. Li Zhixin really didn't know what expression to make, so he forced a smile and chased after him. Let's go, anyway, with you here, I'm very safe. Safe. Yilan himself dared not utter the word safe now. You guys are really something, letting the researchers go up directly, and then all leaving. Yilan could hardly imagine what it was like up there. The ancient god's touch was very likely just feigning death, holding back some trump card. But Yilan was truly overwhelmed. He absolutely had to go down the radiant disk to follow Su Limo and see what he was up to, so much so that his decision was already very risky, using these family heads as a get-out-of-jail-free card to exploit a bug on the radiant disk. But they all came down. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Yilan gradually felt relieved. Maybe it's a good thing, isn't it? The moment Yilan forced it out, it would certainly be the final battle of this shadow of the past, so he chose not to trigger it yet, but to follow Su Limo and see what he was up to. During this period, Yilan used Li Zhixin and the other 2 as a get-out-of-jail-free card. After all, in Yilan's view, they were all people who were definitely not going to die in the future, like the main characters. They might encounter dangerous situations, but when it wasn't time for them to die, they simply couldn't die. After bringing them within Yi Wuhan's ability range, Yilan was completely at ease and began to uncover the final secret in Radiant City. But now, Yilan had realized a problem. It began with the completely unexpected encounter with Xia Tianan. It began with the death of Zhao Ganghuang. History can only record a piece of text, but behind that text are too many stories. They could all die, after all. He had never verified 30 years later whether these 4 family heads were their true selves. Sweeping the miscellaneous thoughts from his mind, Yilan and Li Zhixin, one in front and one behind, stepped onto the pure white light pillar beneath the radiant disk. Slowly ascending, bit by bit, upwards. Origin. Snap. Landing firmly on his feet, Yilan once again arrived at the main hall of the radiant disk. Whether it was his imagination or not, Yilan felt that it was even more spacious here. Busy teams and staff were everywhere, figures moving about, making it extremely lively for a time. Sweating profusely, worried, incredibly excited, 1,000 different faces were on display. Yilan's gaze swept around, moving forward, his brows slightly relaxing. Was I overthinking it? Nothing seemed out of place, no problems at all. Looking at the ancient god's touch, which was surrounded by dozens of people in a central, rear position, looking like a wilting eggplant about to perish at any moment, Yilan was deep in thought. If history hadn't been changed. If Zhao Gengmawan's death was originally part of the correct history. How should I recreate that scene from the shadow of the past? Yilan closed his eyes. In the scenes from the shadow of the past, the radiant disk enveloped the entire radiant city, soaring in the sky, and the entire flying disk had transformed into flowing tentacles, like a living monster soaring through the air. Tens of thousands of endless tentacles connected from the radiant disk to every corner of Radiant City, a chilling sight. That scene must not have happened yet, and it's about to happen. Yilan leaned against the bed, his brows furrowed tightly. Where is the disaster? Where is the crisis? Where is the flashpoint? Everything currently seems too calm. The third brother went west of the wasteland and won't be back for a short time. In this situation, the Twilight God cult brought almost all of its elite forces. Without the third brother, the Twilight God cult had no confidence in solving the problem of the ancient god's touch in Radiant City, never had from beginning to end. So much so that when the frontline team reported the completion of their mission, Xia Tianan was the first to sense that something was wrong. Which means, Yilan leaned by the window, casually looking at the vessel containing the ancient god's touch. It was so fragile, like a withered seedling, beyond merely faintly breathing, it could be said to shatter at a touch. Researchers used various instruments to probe it, occasionally trying to cut something, but it showed not the slightest reaction. It was like a prepared raw marinade, looking like it still had a breath, but in reality, it was thoroughly dead. You bastard, you're really good at playing dead, aren't you? Yilan's expression was as usual, but in his heart, he silently cursed. He had always suspected that the ancient god's touch still had power, merely feigning weakness. But he never imagined it had so much power. To create a scene like that in the shadow of the past, its power must be terrifying, truly terrifying. And it still wants to play dead? Who are you trying to trick, you bastard? Suddenly, Yilan thought of himself. When he first emerged from the containment tower, how weak was he then? But actually, thinking about it now, even then, dying would have been difficult, being defeated would have been difficult. A lean camel is still bigger than a horse, Yilan sighed, but still didn't move. He knew deeply that this journey into the shadow of the past had reached its very end. The moment he touched the ancient god's touch would be the moment that scene appeared and everything ended. And clearly, that was not a good scene, that was a disaster. A disaster that Yilan, at this very moment, had not yet figured out how to resolve. The current problem was never whether to trigger it. Rather, it was that after triggering it, he would have to leave immediately. But he had to resolve it, he had to suppress the ancient god's touch, he had to squeeze every last drop of its power dry. Only then could it be powerless to cause trouble for the next 30 years, waiting for himself to arrive and utterly defeat it. A direct confrontation? Yilan thought about it, it seemed like the only way. Yilan felt he could win, he should be stronger now. But the problem was, if he used up all his power now, how would he fight 30 years later when he returned? His eyes shifted, and Yilan thought of many things. But not fighting wasn't an option either. If I don't fight, who will? I'm already in Radiant City. I've already discussed it with the Twilight God cult. Moreover, Yilan already had a guess. 006 was already here, although it should still have a qualitative gap compared to the top 5 anomalies in the sequence, and although it was not one of the powers that, according to the third brother, could face the ancient god's touch alone. But it was his right-hand man. A contingency I left for myself, huh? Yilan smiled, stopped leaning by the window, and stood up. Then let's fight. It's just that not having the mind cap during the decisive battle feels unusually unsettling. Put. Just then, a solid piercing sound came, the mere hearing of which caused unimaginable pain. Yilan looked down, a dagger permeated with an ominous aura had pierced his abdomen from behind. Put. A mouthful of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. As the dagger was inserted, all the psionic energy and blood throughout Yilan's body seemed to rage together, roaring madly, almost tearing Yilan apart from the inside by his own power in an instant. Yilan expressionlessly turned his head. Li Zhixin's face had, at some point, completely disappeared into the shadows. A strange curve appeared on his lips. Completely unexpected? Your expression truly brings me joy. You must have had only true friends by your side until now, never having been stabbed in the back, right? Put. Yilan spat out another mouthful of blood, which had already begun to turn black. Even after being spat out, it still seemed to float on the ground as if trying to come alive. Are you very confused why the injury is so severe? Yilan ignored him, lowering his head to assess his body's condition. The dagger inserted into his body now only had its hilt retaining its original shape. From the moment the blade pierced his body, it was like a seedling taking root, or a parasite finding a host, integrating into his entire body. Swimming and splitting like small fish, spreading throughout. Those granular powers constantly dispersed and recombined, rampaging and spreading in all directions, with strange particles occasionally sticking to various parts of his body, his flesh wriggling as if to assimilate. His entire body was itching, simultaneously enduring the erosion of this strange power. So that's it, Yilan looked up, staring into Li Zhixin's eyes. How long have you controlled this human? Li Zhixin's smile widened further. You really know who I am, huh? He twisted the dagger in the flesh again. Well, not for long, actually. It was when those 4 human worms gathered in the square to talk. After they finished, you went to investigate some missing persons case, and I took control of this idiot. Yilan's thoughts returned to that time, and he narrowed his eyes. You controlled the phantom expanse just to silently replace a substitute? Pretty much. Li Zhixin spread his hands. Although I don't know how the rotten god cult got the news, I almost lost the opportunity. Yilan was expressionless. So that means, the Li Zhixin I knew before that was genuinely treating me as a brother, then? Ha? Li Zhixin almost didn't understand what Yilan was saying, and it took him a while to comprehend. No way, you actually considered this little worm a buddy? I suppose so. Yilan's body seemed to have become a battlefield, trembling slightly as he leaned by the window. They all like to be like this. Clinging to my side, calling me brother. Black blood once again spilled from the corner of Yilan's mouth. This time, the blood didn't drop to the ground, it even wriggled at the corner of his mouth, emitting an eerie glow. So, you deserve to die. Li Zhixin, or rather, the ancient god's touch, was genuinely stunned for a moment this time, then burst into maniacal laughter. Ha 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 ha. I can't believe it, you still haven't realized the situation? Where do you get your confidence? Ha 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 ha. Yilan raised an eyebrow, maintaining his posture, and scanned him up and down. You don't seem quite normal either. Since when did the ancient god's touch act like a clown? You're chatting with me like a chatterbox, don't you think it lowers your prestige? Li Zhixin paused, then showed a helpless expression. I still need this skin for a while. You ordinary little anomalies can't understand, each of my avatars fully embodies the personality of that avatar. Little anomaly. Do you know who I am? Yilan smiled slightly, though he looked rather miserable. I don't know. The ancient god's touch was quite frank. I've been with you for a long time, researching and testing many times, but you've been very careful, never using your psionic energy or power. However, it doesn't matter. No matter how strong you are, you're not that fireball or withered tree. No matter how strong you are, you're merely at the level of 004, 005, the right and left hand of 001. Li Zhixin smiled and spread his arms. I respect you greatly, you will die with great honor. Despite my power being so scarce, I still allocated a portion of my primordial power, condensing it into this dagger to pierce your body. The principle is even simpler, it connects our powers in a single channel until one side is completely suppressed to death. You will be another one of my avatars in the future, ha ha ha. Boom! Just then, accompanied by an incredibly distant, thunderous roar, the entire radiant city trembled. The next moment, the radiant disk, floating in the air, was even more like a lone boat in a tide, as if pulled by some force, shaking violently. Yilan slightly tilted his head, looking out the window, only to see endless mist spreading for tens of miles across the sky. Within the mist, tens of thousands of iron chains rose, appearing and disappearing. The endless iron chains continuously extended, wrapping around the radiant disk from all corners, firmly binding it. Millions of iron chains stretched towards the entire radiant city, seemingly connecting the radiant disk and the entire radiant city into a single entity. Then, as if to completely transform the city into another form, to extract it from the world. Oh! Li Jixin let out a soft exclamation, also looking out the window, not at all flustered. This must be your companion, right? Let me think. Oh, you call it 006 over there? So, it's here to coordinate with you from the inside and outside. I suppose you both are powers directly loyal to 001? He didn't wait for Yi Lan's answer, extremely confident in his own deduction. He's quite the sacrificial type. Knowing the tide had turned, he tried to lock me and Radiant City together through self-sacrifice? If I were just a little weaker, just a little bit, then it might not have been impossible. But unfortunately, Li Jixin was truly delighted. You're all giving me gifts one by one, I'm almost embarrassed. Boom! The ancient god's touch no longer concealed itself. The tottering seedling almost instantly writhed, and then a strange power began to spread. Rustle! A chilling sound came, and the entire radiant disk turned into a world of flesh and blood. Boom! Boom! The entire radiant disk instantly spread with terrifying power, even becoming a giant source of pollution itself. It came alive, transforming into a writhing, floating monster. Whoosh! The monster grew tentacles in all directions, coiling and climbing the tens of thousands of chains, spreading all the way. The two forces contended, turning the chains into tentacles, constantly pushing downwards. His sacrifice will be meaningless, instead, it will help me. I can truly, with this, make Radiant City and I become one. Everything in this city will become my fuel. Yi Lan frowned as he looked at the scene outside the window. Has the final scene of the Shadow of the Past arrived? After a long moment, no dizzying sensation of being teleported away came. Yi Lan looked out again carefully and finally smiled. So, it's different. So, there's still time. Only one last step remained. Yi Lan managed to rein in his smile with great difficulty and turned to look at Li Jixin. What's the point of connecting us? The point is fundamental suppression. Li Jixin seemed very happy to have a 001 subordinate as a clone, or perhaps very happy to directly assimilate. Radiant City, or perhaps he was just simply imitating the tone and attitude that this clone, Li Jixin, should have, enthusiastically and volubly. Saying, "That's why I don't care what god you are, or what anomaly. I'm paying such a high price, you have no power to fight back." Yi Lan's expression almost couldn't help but turn a little strange. Then have you considered, what if you can't suppress me? The ancient god's touch actually paused for a moment. Ha 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 ha. You're killing me. How can you say something so unworldly? Among your containment tower anomalies, besides 001, who can I not suppress? Upon hearing this, Yi Lan's voice became even weaker, like a wisp of smoke. I'm saying, what if you used such a method on my boss, 001? Li Jixin actually thought about it seriously. That would be a bit troublesome. If both I and it were very strong, we might just perish together. If both were relatively weak, we would probably both be severely injured. Li Jixin shrugged, looked at Yi Lan suspiciously, and suddenly a warning sign rose in his heart. What are all these strange questions? I'm not stupid. If I used this move on 001 in this state, that would truly be a bit troublesome. Oh, so that's it. Yi Lan finally showed an undisguised smile. Actually, I didn't want to call you stupid, because you're simply too stable, willing to sacrifice, willing to use such an overkill method to swat a mosquito, just to ensure you're foolproof. I guess, with your control over this clone, you can't even be sure if I'm an anomaly. But, unfortunately, you've hit the jackpot after all. Yi Lan looked at Li Jixin, his smile growing brighter. You don't seem to have noticed one problem yet. Until now, I haven't even used psionic energy. Li Jixin's pupils constricted wildly, and then he froze, as if short-circuited. The main body of the ancient god's touch directly crashed, unable to even spare any attention for controlling this clone. Boom! Deep blue psionic energy roared within Yi Lan's body, pouring into Li Jixin's body like a vortex through the dagger. Yi Lan's power instantly crushed the strange forces blossoming within his body, and like a tidal wave, it surged through the dagger, which acted like a transmitter. In an instant, a clone like Li Jichuan was completely submerged by the deep blue tide. You what, you, a mere clone, without any strength? Yi Lan scoffed, pushed away Li Jixin who was still holding the dagger, passed through the hall, and through the screen where the ancient gods Touch and the Twilight God cult had fought earlier. The moment he stepped across, everything before his eyes changed. Most noticeable were the space and vision. You're really good at hiding. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, how many do you have? Yi Lan mocked. This should be the ancient god's touch's true stronghold and core. Everywhere were phantom tentacles, the sky pulsed like an organ, irregularly shaped objects sometimes rotated like eyeballs, and sometimes shuddered. In a cyclical breathing motion, while the ground felt like treading on disgusting, indescribable matter. In this infinitely vast flesh and blood hell, the ancient god's touch was still placed in a vessel, but it remained motionless, constantly shrinking. As if manipulating the space of this area. Actually, it's no use running. Yi Lan shrugged, I didn't come here to fight you, just to scout the area and check on you. Yi Lan pointed to his abdomen, where the strange dagger was still embedded. Your introduction just now was really detailed. I guess I just need to use as much power as it has, right? The ancient god's touch looked a bit comical for a moment, neither retreating nor advancing. No. No. Boom. All of Yi Lan's power surged into the dagger in his body. In the same instant, something seemed to snap. The power of the ancient god's touch before his eyes visibly weakened by more than half, and then with a crack, it completely withered. It seemed like there wasn't much change, but Yi Lan just had a feeling that this ancient god's touch in front of him was different. It had lost that vast, unfathomable feeling. The other ancient god's touch severed its connection with this one? Yi Lan quickly reacted, frowning, too cowardly, aren't they? Shouldn't they gather their strength and fight me now? No, it didn't sever itself, it was Pancher's lock. Outside the screen, Li Jixin stood at the edge of the flesh and blood hell, his face distorted. How is this possible? Who are you? How could you be? Snap. Puff puff. The entire flesh and blood hell seemed to rot, endless tentacles fell off as if losing their vitality, turning into withered gray-black. The space continuously shrank, and finally all the strange sights disappeared, and everything before his eyes was the original hall again. Yi Lan felt that the dagger connecting the two on his body had completely become his one-sided output, no longer consuming much, and couldn't help but look suspiciously at the ancient god's touch in the vessel, muttering, Why do I feel like you're playing dead again? Yi Lan took 2 steps towards the window and looked out. Although he didn't say it, Yi Lan was still a little worried about 006's condition. Boom! The entire radiant disk seemed to lose its support, almost shaking with rotation, making Yi Lan a little dizzy. Tens of thousands of chains lost their strange traces, only appearing much, much thinner, no longer possessing their former grandeur and majesty. Among those already somewhat thin tens of thousands of chains, there were even some rusty spots, as if scarred. Yet, even so, they remained tightly connected to Radiant City. Does this mean the injury is quite severe? However, Yi Lan glanced out during the rotation and chuckled softly. So that's how it is, it's been restored. The tens of thousands of lines connecting the radiant disk in every corner of Radiant City were the Pancher's lock, which had just been almost completely eroded by the ancient god's touch and weakened to the point of losing its original form. And the reason the radiant disk flew like a monster was because it was already tottering, as if about to fall. Yi Lan looked again at the ancient god's touch in the vessel at the back of the hall. Its appearance was simply, barely perceptible in its weakness. In that case, I should have squeezed you dry. Just stay put for 30 years, obediently. With a soft sneer, a faint dizziness echoed around Yilan. Yilan knew it was time to leave the shadow of the past. Just before the radiant disk was about to fall to the ground like a plummeting meteor, the moment Yilan began to disappear, the ancient god's touch finally moved with difficulty, using its last bit of strength to save the radiant disk from disaster, making it fly up with immense effort. What came through was no longer Li Jixin's voice, but an incredibly ancient, yet shocking voice. You are actually 001. How is this possible? I wasn't just. Unfortunately, Yilan couldn't hear the rest of his words. Yilan just wanted to say, you really are good at playing dead. Light flashed, and Yilan suddenly opened his eyes. Put. The moment he opened his eyes, Yilan spat out a mouthful of blood. Brother Yilan, meow. Mind Cat leaped onto Yilan, the impact almost making Yilan spit out another mouthful of blood. What's wrong with you, meow? Why did you suddenly almost lose control just now, meow? Don't panic, meow. I meow, never mind. Yilan rubbed his head, feeling a little weak. It's not a big problem. I got cut by the ancient god's touch in the shadow of the past, but I won a great victory. Mind Cat? What did you even do while I was gone for a bit, meow? This is called not a big problem? How does this sound like not a big problem? Reorganization. Wait a minute, meow. The Mind Cat took a deep breath, feeling like its tiny head couldn't hold such a massive amount of information. What's going on, meow? What happened, meow? Don't panic. Yilan waved his hand, glanced at the time, and rubbed his forehead. There's still time, I'll tell you slowly later. For now, you need to briefly tell me about the situation outside. For example, have the Twilight God cult members arrived? 450. The Mind Cat quickly composed itself and focused on the present. Indeed, the upcoming encounter between the three parties was quite important. All in all, they couldn't lose face for the Eternal Night God, right? Not yet, meow. The Twilight God cult is known for its punctuality, meow, so while they won't be late, they usually don't arrive early, meow. Feeling his current location, Yilan relaxed slightly. At the night house? Yes, meow. Just as you expected, meow. The evacuation of the two great divine churches to the lower district was very smooth, meow. No one stopped them at all, meow. Yilan nodded slightly. Good. Time is short. Go supervise the arrangements again. Our people basically have no experience running large events like this. See where we can apply ourselves, and when special effects are needed, add some special effects. Upon hearing this, the Mind Cat immediately looked smug, as if thinking, sure enough, you and I are on the same wavelength. Of course, meow. My special effects are already very magnificent, meow. Yilan? No. If you put it that way, I'm actually starting to get a little nervous, alright? No, don't go. Take the Eternal Nightmare to the venue and let it be in charge, then come back. I need to talk to you about the shadow of the past. Many things had overturned his conjectures and known facts. Many things had to be re-examined and rethought. Is that so, meow? The Mind Cat was clearly a bit regretful about not being able to continue managing the venue arrangements, but the matters within the shadow of the past clearly captivated its attention more. Was cut by the ancient god's touch? What the hell? How big of a deal is that? Come with me, meow. The Eternal Nightmare finally stopped slacking off and swayed out with the Mind Cat. Yilan gently frowned as he checked the location of his wound. It had mostly healed completely, but he could still feel a lingering effect. A bidirectional reduction. His eyes moved, and Yilan organized his thoughts. First, the Li family's problem. Yilan narrowed his eyes. According to what I saw in the shadow of the past, Li Jixin, who is now the Li family head, was already controlled by the ancient god's touch 30 years ago. So, it's clear that Li Zichuan cannot be without problems. In the most extreme case, Li Zichuan could simply be a clone of the ancient god's touch. The probability of this extreme case should be at least 70%. Yilan's eyebrows constantly tightened and relaxed. Somewhat unexpected but very reasonable. But the problem is, if it's as I expected, who exactly was the Li family head that I killed? A clone and a pawn? And was the dynasty I destroyed a real dynasty? There's also a minor, insignificant problem here. The Li family head killed in the dynasty didn't seem to recognize me? Yilan sighed. Time was short, so he temporarily gave up on dwelling on these details and instead thought about the most crucial matter. This entry into the shadow of the past could be said to have directly changed Yilan's perception, and once again stirred up the situation that had originally become clear. First, the shadow of the past was actually real history. Yilan was just not sure if this counted as two parallel worlds, or if he had truly returned to the past. Second, much of the past history had been personally participated in by him, but the traces were ultimately erased. For example, Radiant City. That meant that the positions of these people, whose motives now seemed clear and bright, could very likely be different. Li Zixin was already confirmed to be the ancient god's touch, with no suspense or foreshadowing. Zhao Ganghuang had already died at that time, which led to an extremely puzzling question: who was the current Zhao Ganghuang? As for Zhao Taihui, it was simple, he was merely the son of the impostor. Returning to Bai Zhuahai's stance, it had completely reversed. As one of only two true survivors back then, even if he wasn't on his side, he was part of a close faction. He was very rational, and as long as he was rational, he couldn't mindlessly side with the ancient god's touch. Even though there were constant frictions between them, he hadn't held back either. But on second thought, it seemed that this time in Radiant City, there hadn't been any real conflict with the Bai family from beginning to end. Other than their initial, seemingly earnest search for him, which caused some trouble, the actual friction was far less intense than with the Zhao family and Li family. Even Ai Tao Tao was still here, and they didn't seem to be looking for her much anymore. Yilan rubbed his temples, his expression growing increasingly strange. Then Su Limo is very interesting. He should have recognized me earliest, at the very latest, it should have been after I arrived in Radiant City, given the relationship with Su Lo Zhang. Also, I'm still not entirely clear why Panshi's lock appeared there at the time, but from the results, it definitely successfully disgusted the ancient god's touch with my help. Most importantly, it seemed to only obey my right-hand man. From this relationship, Su Limo was most likely one of my own people, at least that's how it seemed at the time. Of course. 30 years had passed, and human hearts change. No one knew what might have happened during all these years. Especially with the operations and development of the other three families later, it would be difficult for the Su family not to be tainted. But there was still a most crucial, vitally important factor here. Panshi's lock. No matter what the situation of the Su family was, the Su family head had not changed. No matter how turbulent everything was, Panshi's lock must have succeeded with his help at that time. Under the two prerequisites, there should be no need to worry about Su Limo's change of stance. Yi Lan's thoughts became clearer, and the entire situation was largely sorted out again. Then, his mouth twitched slightly. So, the impropriety of the Radiant Disk was so obvious, yet the Twilight God cult didn't make a move on Radiant City for so many years. Could it be because of me? Because they were waiting for me. The third one should have returned from west of the wasteland, or at least visited. Then he understood the situation here. And then it was probably the boss is operating? I don't quite understand, but never mind, like that. However, fortunately, if his instructions could be properly implemented by the Twilight God cult, there would be no more hidden dangers. Anyway, the boss has already ordered my people to do things, so haven't I already done my best? But Yi Lan frowned. Since entering Radiant City, the help I've received from Twilight has been too limited, right? New possibilities. Is it because too much time has passed? Plus, there was an anomaly helping to hide that memory at the time? After some thought, Yilan basically accepted this possibility. That's right. It was Xia Tianan who contacted him and handled the subsequent matters, but Xia Tianan seemed to have long since distanced himself from the power center of the Twilight God cult, and the Pope was no longer the Pope of that generation. Unless the third one gave a clear divine revelation, and he hadn't contacted him, he probably wouldn't do anything. It wasn't until he contacted Qingyu and directly asked for reinforcements that this past was brought up again. Yes, the reinforcements from the Twilight God cult this time were Xia Qingfei, Xia Tianan's son, which can be considered a continuation of this past. The only difference was whether Xia Tianan had told Xia Qingfei everything, and whether he knew about his past actions. Yilan was pensive. From the current situation, the second one is still sleeping, and the third one hasn't appeared in the world for a long time. Wait, a long time? 60 years ago, it should have been the second one who was severely injured, while the third one's problem wasn't very serious. Then 30 years ago. Wait. No. Yilan's brows furrowed. If the shadow of the past did indeed return to the past and participate in history, then a problem arose. 60 years ago, in Sewage Town, the second one should not have been severely injured, because he appeared there. So for what reason did the second one get severely injured and fall into a deep sleep later? The whole situation instantly became chaotic again, and for a time, Yilan had no time for other concerns, only able to prioritize thinking about issues related to the present moment. 30 years ago, the third one went to civilization's end. So he hasn't returned yet? Or hasn't fully returned? Yilan Gij Meow. Mind Cat finally assigned the task to Eternal Nightmare and quietly returned to Yilan's room, with a hint of worry in its tone. You seem a little weak now, Meow. There isn't much power left, Meow. How did going to the shadow of the past consume so much, Meow? Next. Don't panic. Yilan smiled. Although his power was greatly diminished, he wasn't weak at all. After all, although the power consumption this time was huge, it was not wasted, and the benefits outweighed the losses. Although it seems like I've become the weaker party, in reality, I've severed the connection between the ancient god's touch and Radiant City and its main body, and under 006 secret control, the ancient god's touch here is now essentially isolated and helpless. I am now very certain that as early as 30 years ago, I had already crippled it, and even buried a big trap in its territory. How could he lose this round? 006 Meow? Mind Cat was immediately confused. Yilan nodded slightly, and while there was still time, briefly described what happened in the shadow of the past, 30 years ago. The little cat listened in utter shock. So the truth of the shadow of the past is that one can return to the past, Meow? Which means you really went back, Meow. Everything that happened today is based on your actions 30 years ago, Meow? In other words, everything today is one of your schemes from back then, Meow? So that's how it is, Meow. Amidst the little cat's exclamations, Yilan rolled his eyes. You don't need to say so that's how it is anymore. To tell you the truth, I've already made a decision. Yilan's expression was serious. No matter what plans I've laid out, once the matter of Radiant City is over, I will begin to investigate my own past. Yilan's expression was slightly solemn, also looking at the little cat's reaction. Do you think it's appropriate? Mind Cat's eyes flickered, and it pondered with difficulty. It might be a bit early, Meow, but I support you, Meow. Yilan nodded gently. The little cat still knew many things that he didn't, but now it seemed that this was still a part of his plan. Since the little cat didn't say anything, it should indeed be something that couldn't be said, so he would just follow the clues and wait until the right moment. Yilan could now feel that although he was very strong, he had an opponent of the same level, the ancient god's touch. His current power couldn't compare to his peak state, and the ancient god's touch was similar, almost like it had split, with its avatars blossoming everywhere. The main body of the ancient god's touch was probably also in a very poor state, but it still seemed to be beyond his current capabilities. When his power recovered, it would probably be the time for everything to fully unfold. In the quiet atmosphere, Yilan and Mind Cat each fell into thought. Not long after, Mind Cat suddenly spoke, offering an analysis that Yilan had not considered at all. I suddenly have an idea, meow. Maybe the matter of Radiant City isn't that simple, meow. Even what you did in Radiant City 30 years ago isn't that simple, meow. The more Mind Cat spoke, the more a certain question was answered. Have you ever thought, meow? As an existence of the same level as you, the ancient god's touch really wants to obtain your power, so, didn't you ever think about obtaining its power, meow? Yilan was stunned for a moment. According to your statement, meow, the research of the 4 great families of Radiant City is based on the premise of having already decomposed different parts of the ancient god's touch, meow. Mind Cat licked its lips. What did you think of, meow? Yilan was stunned for a moment, his pupils slightly constricted. You think this isn't just because I wanted to restore history, but also... Yilan was frozen. I can take this opportunity to usurp the 4 powers of the ancient god's touch? The scene became quiet again, and this time even Yilan was at a loss for words for a long time. There's no evidence to support it yet, and I haven't gained anything yet. Yilan was pensive, but I will always keep an eye on this possibility. If it's really possible. Yilan smiled faintly, then it might truly be a major event that could rewrite the strategic balance. Dong dong dong. Squeak. Arthur, in his battle attire, quickly knocked on the door and rushed in, his movements already extremely swift. Divine Envoy. Something's happened. Yilan looked over, understanding that this reaction wasn't because Xia Chengfei had arrived, but because something else had occurred. Speak. Arthur scanned the room, confirmed there were no outsiders, and spoke directly. The Bai family sent the severely injured Bai Qingshan over without saying anything. Yilan was silent for a moment, then finally smiled softly. Are they crazy? A great war is about to begin, why would they throw their family to me? Aren't they afraid I'll use their family to threaten them? Yilan sighed softly, a hint of remembrance hidden deep in his eyes. It's interesting, though, they really keep their word. They want to try and fight me. And they trust that I won't harm his son. Understood. Yilan waved his hand, observe carefully and treat him well. Wait, treat? Yilan's face suddenly turned frosty. Bring that old doctor to me. Arthur looked at Yilan's tone and expression, nodded, and understood. Not long after, the old doctor of Sewage Town was brought over, his face full of terror. Facing each other, Arthur discreetly left the room. You're quite the actor, aren't you? Old doctor? No. Wait. Don't draw your gun. What's wrong? I didn't do anything. You're quite the actor. Yilan was so angry his teeth ached. Why did you pretend not to know me in Sewage Town? Old doctor. How did this get to Sewage Town? No. Wait. Let me sort this out first. The old doctor moved nimbly, performing a maneuver like Qin Shi Huang circling the pillar, even though Yilan hadn't moved. Which matter are you talking about? You damn. Yilan gritted his teeth. 60 years ago, you clearly saw me, but then recently, you put on an act with me in Sewage Town? Pretending to be profound, huh? Pretending it's our first meeting, huh? Pretending not to know me, huh? Old doctor. Wait a minute. He was still circling the pillar like Qin Shi Huang. No, I didn't know what you wanted to do. You didn't recognize me either. Oh, so you didn't acknowledge me either. And you didn't pay attention to me either. If you insist on talking about this, the only reason I could stay in Sewage Town all this time is because of the foreshadowing you laid 60 years ago, isn't it? You didn't tell me about it, so how dared I say anything? Yilan's gaze was cold, and the old doctor quickly offered more explanations. I was also startled, wasn't I? After you first went to my clinic, I immediately consulted the god of stitching. Its divine revelation was that you either had amnesia or had grand intentions, and it told me to be careful. If you pretended not to know me, then I would pretend not to know you first. It said at the time that you definitely weren't specifically looking for it, and there was still the ancient god's touch underwater. It wanted to gather power, and having you around made it feel a lot safer, so it told me to cooperate with your act. Yi-lan. You? Did-day. The sound of propellers rose, and a helicopter descended from the sky in the last moments of the night, slowly landing in front of Nighthouse. Yi-lan glanced at the time. 5 o'clock sharp. You love to act, you like to act, don't you? I'll have a good chat with you later. Yi-lan took a deep breath and shooed him out. Nighthouse, open the door. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Nighthouse slowly ascended, the stone pillars beneath it rising layer by layer, kicking up dust and air currents. The stairs, like intricate parts, climbed all the way up, revealing the deepening Nighthouse door at the very top. 3 major religions in the wasteland. At 5 a.m., Xia Chengfei arrived punctually at Guangwei City Lower District, his helicopter landing in front of the Nighthouse's station. Amidst the roar, Xia Chengfei, tall and straight, strode onto the ground. With a rustle of footsteps and equipment, an elite squad leaped out, encircling Xia Chengfei. He was covered in the dust of travel, and a little restless. The Eternal Night Divine Church had emerged out of nowhere. Besides having a main god vouch for it, no one actually understood it or had any contact with it. Mystery was almost synonymous with the Eternal Night Divine Church in today's wasteland. As the steps slowly opened, Xia Chengfei remained still for a long time, merely gazing deeply at the magnificent Nighthouse. Though he had heard about it, he still felt a profound sense of gravity. An anomaly as a headquarters. If the main god wasn't powerful enough, which anomaly would willingly agree to such a thing? Tap, tap. Footsteps echoed from within the Nighthouse, and the Eternal Night Divine Church's elites emerged fully armed, lining up on both sides, with Arthur and Luocho standing side by side. Arthur briefly glanced at Luocho, who was still completely unaccustomed to such occasions, then sighed and forced a smile, walking forward. Twilight shines, scattering the last light. Arthur's mouth twitched slightly. It was with great difficulty that he managed to respond with a serious expression to the ceremonial greeting that the Eternal Night Divine Church's followers had painstakingly devised day and night. Eternal night stars, bringing the last peace. After a series of official greetings, Arthur gestured inside, and Xia Chengfei, without any further hesitation, stepped confidently into the Eternal Night Divine Church's cathedral. Within this spacious staircase, the group reached the second floor. Suddenly, psionic light flickered, and Xia Chengfei's entire body glowed with the faint light of dawn, as if instinctively resisting and isolating something. Crack. The elite squad of the Twilight God cult's expressions changed drastically, and they all drew their weapons and activated various ability objects, pointing them around, a tense atmosphere suddenly arising. Xia Chengfei frowned, but he didn't react excessively. He merely turned his head to Arthur, calmly and with a hint of suspicion. What does this mean? Arthur felt a little awkward, but he replied with a righteous air. Entering the dream realm. He probably guessed the question Xia Chengfei would inevitably ask, so he answered directly, besides the dream realm. Where else could be absolutely safe and not eavesdropped upon? Xia Chengfei didn't deny the answer, but his brows were tightly furrowed. Whose dream? No one's. Arthur maintained his smile. It's a dream simulated by the god of nightmare, an intermediate zone between half-dream and half-reality. Xia Chengfei was silent for a moment, then let out a soft sigh, ultimately saying nothing, just nodding. The eternal nightmare should clearly be a deity attendant of their faction. As for the so-called anti-eavesdropping reason, it was purely concocted by Little Cat. Although it could serve such a purpose, it didn't actually believe that ancient god's touch would dare to sneak into Yilan's base to eavesdrop. This whole charade was purely for special effects. The Eternal Night currently didn't have that many anomalies, so in such an occasion, every single one had to be brought out and utilized. On another note, this was also the second time the Eternal Nightmare was forced to show its loyalty. Whose side are you on, exactly? And quite obviously, the Eternal Nightmare had already made its choice. It had been too long. You wouldn't know until you looked, and once you looked, you'd be shocked. For example, 006, who had always been doing God knows what, the boss's right-hand man, suddenly appeared with a whoosh and made his move. Then there was the boss's I don't know expression, perfectly coordinated, which made one shiver upon closer thought. What did this mean? This was too much strategizing, wasn't it? Another example was the hunter, who didn't even know what he was doing, clearly an anomaly assassin, an unreasonable fellow like the boss, who was silently activated and recruited by Yilan. Then a huge trap was laid in Ancient God's Touch's bed. How many more such unknown secrets did the boss have? If he hadn't been more sensible, who knew where a pit would have been dug and prepared for him? Whoosh! A deep blue shimmer flickered, and amidst the intertwining of dreams and illusions, Xia Qingfei and his group entered the half-dream, half-real hall. The four walls were the same color, the floor shimmered as if treading on air, and the ceiling glowed with a nighttime halo, occasionally punctuated by twinkling stars, as if one were in the vast universe. The deep blue of the eternal night rippled outwards like water, spreading in all directions. The nighthouse transformed its structure from within, erecting layers of stone pillars that spiraled upwards into the sky within this dreamlike hall. In the center, a golden behemoth rose like a living statue from the waves of the eternal night, then spread its massive hand, flattening it in the very center of the stone platform beneath the starry sky. The conference table was in this central position, atop the elevated palm. Tap, tap, tap. Xia Qingfei, without any extra expression, walked step by step upwards, stepping onto the palm of the formless hand. He looked around, had no objection to the seating arrangement, ignored Lin Jiao, who looked displeased across from him, and calmly sat in his seat, closing his eyes to rest. After a few breaths, Yilan slowly arrived at the scene. As his gaze swept around, he initially felt that the special effects were a bit awkward. But seeing that no one seemed to notice and everyone was extremely serious and solemn, he felt a slight relief. It's good that you all think it's normal. I can only say that I'm still not good at this kind of pretentious display of divine power. But it must be said, for humans, this kind of thing is very effective. Yilan, as the host, sat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over Xia Qingfei and Lin Jiao, who were directly opposite each other, without lingering, then exchanging glances with Su Lezhang and Su Limo, who were seated opposite each other in the second row. This was the first time Yilan had seen Su Limo in a practical sense. The latter already showed signs of old age, no longer possessing his former heroic demeanor. Su Lezhang, on the other side, looked left and right, finally seeing Yilan again, but for a moment he didn't know whether to greet him or remain serious. They arrived relatively late, and it was unclear whether it was Su Lezhang or Su Limo who was deliberately delaying their arrival until just now. However, according to Little Cat's report, Su Lezhang, under his orders to confiscate, temporarily take over the Su manor, seemed to have searched a bit too thoroughly, and Su Limo was quite angry. Little Cat, what's going on? Yilan couldn't help but send a telepathic message. Suddenly, Little Cat seemed to enjoy watching the drama unfold. But Su Lezhang searched a little too diligently. It seems he found some of City Lord Su's private matters. Meow. Yilan. He couldn't think of what kind of private matters it could be, and for a moment, he silently gave a 6 in his heart. Ahem. Yilan cleared his throat, his expression serious. Since everyone is here, we can begin. Yilan sat up straight, his hands clasped on the table, and he surveyed the room. The setup here is a bit grand, but everyone need not worry. This is, after all, the last meeting before our operation against Ancient God's Touch. We must ensure we are not spied upon by Ancient God's Touch. On another note, Yilan's expression was extremely serious. It's also to prevent you all from fighting. Upon hearing this, Xia Qingfei remained composed, as if he had no intention of fighting the rotten god cult, but Lin Jiao didn't bother to hide her thoughts and spoke in a sinister tone. Yes, as expected of the Twilight God cult, people always appear so timely. After others have fought to the death, when it's time to reap the fruits of victory, the entire army suddenly deploys. Before the war. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the venue instantly dropped to freezing point. Su Limo kept his eyes straight, not even glaring at Su Lejong, and leisurely took a sip of tea. As the city lord of Guangwei City Lower District, and a fixed representative of Radiant City for various diplomatic and mediation occasions, he was all too familiar with such scenes. The way to handle it was also very simple: hear nothing, see nothing, know nothing, play a perfect game of Tai Chi, and let the two big shots argue. The only difference was that this time, the scale of the scene was a bit high. Under the gaze of the mysterious Yilan, the Twilight God cult's head of punishment and the rotten God cult Saintess confronted each other. Xia Qingfei's face turned cold, or rather, he had wanted to turn cold for a long time, just waiting for the other party to pick a fight first. I was just wondering who was speaking so boastfully here. You can't solve the problem, yet you sit here so primly. Where are your rotten God cult people? Why are you sitting here all alone? Are you too strong? Lin Jiao was hit where it hurt most. After all this trouble, she couldn't rally anyone, and having the Twilight God cult reap the rewards of her labor was already one of the things that made her most unhappy. She really wanted to explode, but couldn't. Yilan had indeed called people from both sides, but she couldn't summon her own people. What was there to say? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got, the angrier she got, the angrier she got. Looking at Lin Jiao's sinister expression, Yilan couldn't help but worry for a second about the current pope of the rotten god cult, whom he had never met. Would this one be beheaded again? Quiet. Su Limo, you speak. Yilan timely interrupted the argument and directly called out Su Limo, who naturally couldn't continue to slack off. He got up and bowed to Yilan. I don't know how to deal with the ancient god's touch, but I don't think I'm needed to deal with it. I'll just talk about my views on the Bai and Zhao families. He cleared his throat. The Bai family's preparations are relatively thorough. The Bai mansion is the core of their core, and the experimental building is one of their important structures. Based on my speculation, everyone in the Bai mansion, including the servants, has undergone at least 3 special gene enhancement procedures. I reasonably speculate that however many people there are in the Bai mansion, there will be that many forces with the strongest gene enhancement on the day of the decisive battle. This speculation made Xia Qingfei's expression sink slightly. Can they really achieve abnormal strength? Su Limo glanced at him and gently shook his head. I can only say they are very strong, but not that strong. At least, I never thought they could reach the level of a god. According to your Twilight God cult strength standards, 2 elite teams should be able to deal with 3. But Bai Zhuahai must be the one enhanced to the strongest level, so you need a truly abnormal presence to arrive. Xia Qingfei quietly breathed a sigh of relief. If it was within the scope of the Twilight God cult's elite team, then it was good. What's more, the Twilight God cult's teams, with the blessing of the promised ark, could double their strength. As for the Zhao family, you might not believe it, Su Limo spread his hands, but I think he's always been slacking off. Besides ensuring research progress, he hasn't made more efforts or improvements. In my eyes, their mechanized military corps is just for show, but their defense is too formidable. Even for you, they will be very tough to crack. Slacking off? Yi Lan's eyebrows twitched. Where did this feeling come from? He couldn't figure out the answer. His biggest impression of Zhao Ganghuang now was that he was incredibly foolish for trying to kill him on the Guangwei road to force the 2 great divine churches to have misgivings. Moreover, he had a bigger unsolved mystery, one that even Su Limo was unaware of. 30 years ago, Zhao Ganghuang had already died. I will confirm their final strategic locations. When we set off, my grandson and I will lead you there separately. As he finished speaking, Yilan stopped thinking about those complex things. Anyway, everything would come to light. Then, he looked at Xia Qingfei. When will the promised ark descend? How many abnormals will the Twilight God cult send? Speaking of serious matters, Xia Qingfei's expression was solemn. The promised ark will descend directly when we clear out one of their 2 families. My cult's deity attendant is still waiting for the main god's final divine revelation. If it truly doesn't arrive, 5 abnormals or less will descend after the ancient god's touch appears. Yilan nodded slightly. That's enough, but you might not be strong enough to be the main force, you can only be my support. Yilan nodded, making the final summary. The Su family is responsible for leading the way. The Twilight God cult will handle one family alone. I and the Rotten God cult's people in Radiant City will lead the team to handle the other family. Departure at 6 o'clock sharp. Yilan glanced at the time, his gaze sweeping over Xia Qingfei and Su Limo. I need to talk to each of you separately. The dream of eternal nightmare dissipated, and Yilan and Xia Qingfei sat face to face in the quiet room. I'll get straight to the point. Yilan stared into his eyes. How much do you know about this matter? Xia Qingfei showed a bit of an uncomfortable smile. Even if he knew some things, he was not Xia Tianan, who had personally experienced them. I actually don't know much, but not that little either. Thinking of some incredible words his father had told him before his departure, Xia Qingfei's attitude was still humble, and he answered truthfully, including but not limited to many hidden lines I only learned about today, as well as some arrangements the Twilight God cult made in the past. 30 years ago, my Twilight God cult was not strong enough, and the main god couldn't get away. The existence behind you temporarily took over here. When you appear again, we will thoroughly resolve it together. Yilan nodded. If he hadn't entered the shadow of the past, he would certainly be completely confused right now. No, if he hadn't entered the shadow of the past, this scene probably wouldn't have happened either. So, Yilan paused, your main god will send power here, or even arrive here? No, Xia Qingfei shook his head, the main god's divine revelation is to cooperate fully. Yilan. Never mind, I only have one question. Yilan took a deep breath. 30 years have passed, do you now have the ability to defeat the ancient god's touch on your own? Xia Qingfei pondered for a moment. Under normal circumstances, it's impossible, but the ancient god's touch in Radiant City is a special case. If the eternal night god can prevent the ancient god's touch from directly attacking the promised ark, perhaps we can. Yilan nodded slightly. That sounded pretty good. The situation had become even more perfect. I haven't decided yet whether you will be responsible for dealing with the Bai Mansion or the Zhao Mansion, but no matter which side is finally decided. Yilan paused. If they surrender, remember to accept it. Even if they have been affected by the ancient god's touch, they can still be further protectively detained and their danger assessed. Xia Qingfei was silent for a moment, but it wasn't a refusal. This indeed is quite inconsistent with our usual approach, but given the complexity of the situation, I can only do this. After all, I only found out when I arrived that many of the high-ranking officials on the other side are actually our people. Yilan. Although he also had a hand in this matter, still. It's really 3 years and another 3 years, the spies sent out are about to become leaders, and they still haven't reeled them in, right? Meeting. After chatting with Xia Qingfei, Yilan walked into another room. In the room, Su Limo had been waiting for a long time. The two met, truly face to face. Yilan did not conceal his appearance, nor did the other party. They stared at each other seriously for a long time, then both smiled simultaneously. Long time no see. Yilan couldn't help but smile too. Long time no see. Sitting down, Yilan was quite interested. After all, for Yilan, the events of 30 years ago were truly just a flick of the finger. When did you recognize me? Hearing this, Su Limo looked a little embarrassed. Actually, it was after Eternal Night Dawn. Yilan was truly stunned for a moment. Didn't you see the new mist blue coin a long time ago? Su Limo was even more embarrassed. That was just a back, and I never thought it was you. After all, after you disappeared, it was as if you never existed in this world. And Su Limo grew a bit more awkward. My good-for-nothing grandson called you his brother, so I instinctively thought we truly belonged to different generations. Yilan. So, why did you suddenly surrender? Why didn't you consider meeting during this time? I didn't know what you were here for, just as 30 years ago, I still don't know what you were doing. Sulimo was quite straightforward, or perhaps he suddenly treated Yilan as someone from his own generation, very carefree. You made all of this happen. He pointed outside. Now you've come to destroy it all. After a brief silence, Sulimo sighed. Don't mind me, I can roughly guess a few things. After all, after that year, the Panshers Lock never contacted me again, but since I was working for it at the time, I could guess one or two things. It's just that I'm used to negotiating and like to make accusations first. I guess everything back then was for today, right? Yilan didn't speak, and he continued. I've also waited for you for a long time, but it seems like you have no intention of dealing with us this time. He leaned back in his chair, looking old, and let out a scoff. Perhaps I'm old, and I tend to dwell on the past. I don't know who you are, but I feel you're quite cold-hearted. Yilan raised an eyebrow, not feeling that the age difference was inappropriate in this situation. For example? For example, Li Jixin, who first knew you back then and always followed you. You came back this time and just killed him directly. Li Jixin, huh? Mentioning Li Jixin, Yilan's expression also dimmed slightly. He was not reminiscing about the Li Jixin he had killed in the dynasty, but about the Li Jixin he had first met 30 years ago. However, Yilan didn't follow his line of conversation. Li Jixin didn't recognize me at all. Do you have any idea why? Didn't recognize you? Sulimo was truly stunned for a moment, his brows tightly furrowed. Do you mean he lost his memory, or was he swapped out? The memories were too distant, and he gradually became less happy. But Yilan still had too much he wanted to know. Was there truly nothing unusual? In these 30 years? I didn't feel anything. Sulimo said, he was just a little more extreme, a little more gloomy, but his personality was still the same. He just became more and more of a scoundrel. Yilan was silent for a moment. What about Zhao Ganghuang? What do you mean? His state, his spirit. Yilan particularly emphasized these 2 points. Are you still familiar with him? Sulimo thought seriously for a moment. Very familiar, I don't think there's any problem. Yilan looked at him deeply once more. After Bai Zhuahai was seriously injured back then, he never discussed Zhao Ganghuang's issue with you? Sulimo began to ponder seriously, actually also considering Yilan's meaning. Nothing, I guess. These memories are really too old. I only remember him being seriously injured, and Bai Zhuahai told me that Zhao Ganghuang needed to recuperate for a while and couldn't see anyone. And then, after a while, he appeared? Yes. After a moment of contemplation, Yilan recalled the cause of Zhao Ganghuang's death. Is Zhao Ganghuang's second brother still alive? Sulimo shook his head, somewhat surprised that Yilan was still concerned about these old matters from back then at this time. He died long ago. Those 3 brats personally led a team to wipe him out. Yilan's brows immediately relaxed, feeling a sudden enlightenment. But in the end, he died without a complete corpse? Didn't Zhao Ganghuang's second brother take his place then? To stabilize the situation, Bai Zhuahai could very well have propped up Zhao Ganghuang's second brother to impersonate Zhao Ganghuang. No, he didn't. Sulimo's single sentence once again disrupted Yilan's speculation. He died quite miserably. They truly held such a deep grudge. He was paraded through the city, publicly executed by firing squad, and then hung on the city wall for many days. Ah. Yilan's brows furrowed tightly. If the situation was truly like that, then the possibility of the current Zhao Ganghuang being replaced by his second brother became extremely slim. It wasn't that it couldn't be done, but such a grand display, watched by the entire city. Radiant City had many experts, so it would be hard to avoid revealing flaws, which would be detrimental to supporting a stand-in. Yilan rubbed his forehead, organizing these threads one by one. Sulimo looked at Yilan and sighed softly. I think it's still possible to talk. If you truly reveal your identity, directly bring up the events of 30 years ago, and talk to him. You, after all, are the origin of everything. Yilan was silent for a moment, not avoiding the question. But I don't think they have any intention of talking. Besides, there's also Eternal Night Dawn. Yes. Eternal Night Dawn, that was a historical turning point that couldn't be avoided. Eternal Night Dawn, huh? Sulimo also sighed, unceremoniously tilting his head back. I've never understood this matter either. But from that year on, the influence of those three began to spread in the upper district. I haven't been up there for 30 years, and it might have always been like this. There's a generation gap between me and them, our ideas are completely different. Then you truly won't be completely ostracized and constantly suspected? Yilan asked curiously, so did you actually take over a research project? Of course I did. Sulimo shrugged, don't you know those rascals? If I hadn't gotten involved, they would have eliminated me and gone solo 30 years ago. Yilan's brows twitched. But you know, behind me is Panshir's lock, and the core of my research is related to it, with its secret control. Yilan frowned slightly. Then you won't be suspected? How would I know? Perhaps Sulimo knew that the time had come to let go of his burdens, and he was extremely carefree. You certainly know more than I do. The main deity had already shown itself back then, so I don't know why they didn't suspect me. Yilan was speechless for a moment. How is it? Not too good. Sulimo's carefree demeanor suddenly paused. It has almost completely merged with Radiant City. Yilan was silent. Tell me more specifically. Sulimo's eyes flickered, and he whispered something to Yilan. Yilan was slightly startled, and finally a look of realization gradually appeared on his face. Then lead the way, all of this is about to begin. Sulimo paused, and even with his carefree nature, he was still greatly pressured by this sense of impending turmoil. This was Radiant City, this was his home. Is this what you said back then, the cause and the result? Yes, and the situation is likely far more complex than you imagine. Even I have finally figured out some key points. Yilan turned and walked out, just as Xia Chengfei also rose and exited the room. Lin Zhao and I will go to the Zhao family, the Bai family is up to you all. All right. Xia Chengfei didn't ask why. Although they had been arguing over command earlier, a divine revelation from pure remnant sun came down not long after. Just 4 words. Full cooperation. The only slight regret was that it seemed he wouldn't be able to fulfill Bai Zhuohai's dream of having a match with him. But there was no choice. Yilan could only be at ease if he personally went to the Zhao family's situation. Who exactly was Zhao Ganghuang? Zhao Taihui and Zhao Yuan both needed treatment, which would inevitably involve using some of the Zhao family's technology. Without him watching, it was very likely that the ancient god's touch would carry out certain manipulations, burying some irreversible hidden dangers. I will lead the team and depart first. Xia Chengfei cupped his hands to Yilan. Yilan nodded lightly, his brows ultimately furrowing. I hope your team won't rush and will only act after I've made my move on the Zhao family. Xia Chengfei was a bit displeased. His command authority was gone, so how could his freedom of action also be suppressed? But, after all, the main deity's divine revelation came first. If that is your request. After all, the main deity said, full cooperation. Yilan ultimately didn't say the words I demand, but merely shook the communicator in his hand. Keep communication open, and don't try that general outside, military orders not received trick with me. Yilan pointed towards the sky. God is watching. Xia Chengfei's expression became much more serious, and he nodded gently. Rumble. The night house trembled all over, the 4 stone pillars slowly moved, and it began to stride on Guangwei Road. The doors opened wide, and the teams of the Eternal Night Divine Church and the Rotten God Cult were fully prepared, standing on both sides inside the house. Yilan slightly raised his head. The radiant disk quietly hovered in the air, carrying a sense of remoteness and danger. It enveloped the entire sky above Radiant City, as if trying to block the rising sun. Beep beep. Yilan. During the quiet march, a communication sound suddenly rang out. And then Lin Zhao suddenly cried out excitedly. The main deity has sent a divine revelation. An anomaly will come to reinforce us.
Yilan was truly stunned for a moment, and he turned to look at her.
Who? Rotten Spear. The main deity's most powerful deity attendant.
Yilan's expression remained unchanged, but he had already mentally connected with Mind Cat.
It's 011 Meow.
Its power is extremely similar to 003's, but its abilities are too singular. Meow.
It's the most aggressive anomaly I've ever seen. Meow.
That's almost power that ignores space. Meow.
Although it probably can't hurt you. Meow.
But if it attacks others. Meow, even you, an ancient god's touch might not be able to stop it. Meow.
Oh?
Yilan was truly intrigued.
That certainly sounded very powerful. Give me a specific example?
Anyway, every time 002 fights 003, it uses Rotten Spear to ambush. Meow.
So 003 always gets hurt. Meow. Yilan. That was truly a vivid and timely example. Then, shall we depart? No.
Lin Jiao was a bit troubled, yet couldn't hide her joy at turning the tables, the two emotions intertwined. I have to go and personally escort. Those elite squads simply can't handle the presence of this one.
Without the main deity descending, I'm probably the only one who has any standing. Wait a moment.
Yilan had just opened his mouth, but then couldn't help but stop.
He considered the matter. As the saintess of the rotten god cult, raised by the second eldest, handling this matter was no problem and posed no danger. He had no reason to stop her, nor any need to. But for some reason, Yilan felt a slight unease. Oh, come on, what's wrong with you?
Lin Jiao looked at Yilan in confusion, and couldn't help but mutter, finally, your head's clear, and you
realize how good I am. Yilan? I really am. Oh, alright, I finally managed to turn the tables. See you later. Look at that hypocrite, so smug. Is promised arc so great? So powerful? Watch out, Rotten Spear might just pierce through it too. I'm leaving now.
Just as Yilan's mind was reeling from Lin Jiao's nonsense, Lin Jiao had already vanished, rushing ahead of the night house to the end of Guangwei
Road, disappearing into the night.
Yilan gazed at the night sky of the upper district, finally letting out a soft sigh.
God of War. I'm ready.
I'll go with your team, my grandpa will lead that team, and we'll go directly from that position in the upper district.
No rush.
Yilan smiled, sweeping away the discomfort from his mind. The Zhao family's base is in the foundation of the upper district, right?
Yes. Su Lezhang was stunned for a moment. That foundation is where the Guangwei giant cannon was previously placed, right? Yes, it is. What's wrong? Su Lezhang was a bit confused, yet also somewhat familiar with such a scene. Yilan seemed to be about to make a move again. Whoosh!
The defenses of Guangwei Road had been removed, and the Twilight God cult's helicopters rumbled directly towards the Bai family's mansion.
A terrifying fluctuation spread across the sky, and at a glance, there was an eerie, pervasive shadow. It's about to start over there.
Yilan sighed, but I'm still a little worried. I want to finish things here as quickly as possible and at least do some cleanup over there.
So?
Yilan shouted loudly, Arthur.
Here.
Calibrate the Guangwei giant cannon, and blast directly at the foundation, blow a hole in it.
Yes. Night house. Boom. Once the breach is made, connect directly. Enemy at the gates. Boom. Amidst the deafening roar that almost pierced eardrums, the Guangwei giant cannon's explosion swept across the heavens and earth.
In the blink of an eye, a massive gap was blasted into the upper district's territory.
Rumble, rumble, rumble.
Half of the night house was rooted in Guangwei Road, while the other half continuously extended, firmly connecting with the opening in the upper
district's chassis. Da.
Yilan strode forward, entering the chassis, Zhao Gongwang's territory, after the smoke of battle cleared.
Indeed, the center was an almost hollow space, and within it, there was practically a complete city. Countless parts, rows of foundries, filled with the endless scent of machinery. The upper district of Radiant City had always featured a massive slope. Previously, people only speculated it was due to the terrain, but now they knew it was for the underground space. The endpoint resembled a mechanical city, strangely and grandly constructed. Boom! In the blink of an eye, an endless barrage of firepower poured down. Yilan narrowed his eyes and snapped his fingers. Snap! The sky-high firepower dissipated into nothingness. Yilan's gaze swept across, and countless figures gathered from various parts of the underground, drawing closer. Every single one had a body as graceful as a line, exuding a mechanical handsomeness and elegance. Whoosh! Yilan dismantled the hot weapons with a single strike. The cybernetic legion paused in momentary surprise, then their palms all shot out sharp, indestructible blades, charging forward with a mighty roar. Yilan narrowed his eyes, issuing his next command. Nighthouse, form a defensive position. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Using the connection point as a support, the Nighthouse pulled its entire body from Guangwei Road. Then, its external structure constantly changed, transforming into a complete steel skeleton. After the position, counterattack. The two groups engaged in a full-scale firefight. For a time, the Eternal Night Divine Church and the Rotten God Cult launched a dual suppression of hot weapons and ability objects, preventing the Cybernetic Legion, which had been completely disarmed by Yilan, from advancing an inch. Tut tut tut. A spread of firepower, however, couldn't overcome the opponent's top-tier dual defense, and the situation on the scene began to stalemate. Yilan roughly figured out these people's fighting style, no longer stalling, and raised his head. He could only say that if it was just like this, it ultimately wouldn't pose any threat to him. Zhao Ganghuang. I am Yilan, come out and meet me. Didn't I say I never directly sought you out as Yilan? Now, I'm looking for you. As Yilan. Though, it's with an army at your gates. You finally came to find me. I thought you had forgotten. Rumble. Accompanied by a mighty mechanical sound from a distant place, the nearby city trembled violently. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The city stirred up a cloud of dust, and then, little by little, it rumbled to its feet. Boom! As its head rose, it directly broke through the surface. It brandished its massive, entirely mechanical arms, and then with another palm, tore open the entire surface. It stood before him, so colossal that even the immense Nighthouse looked like a tiny mayfly. This wasn't a city. This was a city-sized robot. In the very center of the robot, at the location of its brain, there was a transparent exterior. Beneath it was some kind of transparent vessel, where Zhao Ganghuang could vaguely be seen lying as if in hibernation, his eyes tightly shut. This is me. Boom! The two sides were originally 1,000 meters apart, but the massive mechanical arm actually swung with the speed of a whirlwind, flexibly lifting and moving, and with a force capable of smashing the ground into a rift valley, it fiercely slammed down. Yilan's pupils contracted slightly. He hadn't forgotten what the core technology Zhao Ganghuang's family researched was. Anyone could build robots, even without the apocalypse or the ancient god's touch. His core essence was to allow the wielder to react to and use mechanical creations as if they were their own body. The combat power of transformers and mechs is completely different. Charge energy. Fire the cannon. Yilan certainly couldn't take that thing head-on with his flesh and blood body, otherwise, though he wouldn't truly die, his human body would likely be utterly destroyed. Boom, boom, boom. The four Guangwei giant cannons had their muzzles adjusted by Arthur and Luo Cho, and everyone else leaped back into the Nighthouse. Facing the fiercely charging mechanical arm, the Guangwei giant cannons roared. Boom! Flames roared from the muzzle. The swinging mechanical arm was struck and stiffened violently, ultimately being pushed back. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst a cloud of smoke, Yilan ceased firing the Guangwei giant cannons. As the smoke cleared, the colossal robot containing Zhao Ganghuang reappeared before them. Not a scratch. So sturdy, meow.
The Mind Cat's scalp tingled slightly. What is this thing, meow?
How do we fight it, meow? Immune to both physical and anomalous attacks? Stubborn and hard to deal with, meow? I, too, can become the guardian god of this city.
Zhao Ganghuang roared, slamming a giant arm fiercely onto the ground. Amidst a series of cracking sounds, numerous grooves were revealed within. It swept across the ground like a radar, and thousands of cybernetic legion members leaped in, becoming part of that mechanical arm. In another blink of an eye, the giant arm glowed with electricity, as if countless energies had filled it. Accompanying this was the vast, fluctuating luster of anomalous power. It seems the Zhao family implemented a special design. Modified humans can be used without limit to strengthen this main body that Zhao Ganghuang
possesses, allowing for unlimited enhancement. The Mind Cat nodded repeatedly. Good thing we came early, meow. It can at most arm this one arm, meow. I still can't tell how it manages to make this thing carry anomalous power, meow. I'm afraid it's borrowing the power of the ancient god's touch, meow. Yilan nodded lightly.
Finally, the massive mechanical arm completed its charge, lifted up, held at its highest point, then aimed at Yilan, and slammed down.
Everyone retreat into the night house. Night house, defend.
With that, Yilan himself also retreated into the night house. The night house rooted itself completely in the ground, its entire color deepening. The giant mechanical hand, pressing down like the sky, thus slammed fiercely onto the night house.
Bang! Rumble, rumble, rumble.
The night house was fine, it couldn't possibly have its defenses shattered like that.
But
terrifying immense force poured down from the top of the night house, completely smashing the entire upper district's chassis, taking the night house
with it.
The night house, along with the ground it was rooted in, plummeted from the 1,000-meter height of the upper district towards the lower district. A mechanical arm the size of a district, an indestructible house, thus fell like a plummeting airplane, streaking across the sky with a brilliant tail, directly smashing through the upper district's territory and falling towards the lower district.
Boom!
The moment the night house lost the ground beneath it and uncontrollably fell, another roar echoed across the earth.
However, that was no longer the mechanical arm, but the divine drive.
Yilan twisted the divine drive's throttle to its maximum acceleration, bursting out through the night house's window, roaring as he charged onto Zhao
Ganghuang's still unretrieved mechanical arm.
10,000 meters high, the divine drive, with its slightly diminutive form, surged up along the mechanical arm that had not yet been retracted.
Pursuit. Crack. Crash.
Zhao Ganghuang noticed the figure rushing up his arm with terrifying speed, heading straight for him, and one of his mechanical arms spun wildly 360
degrees.
The mechanical arm spun so fast it was almost invisible, leaving only a vortex-like blur, but the divine drive, with its terrifying grip and control,
continued to sprint at full speed amidst the dizzying rotation. Good driving skills, Zhao Ganghuang exclaimed, but what if I do this?
The entire mechanical arm suddenly glowed intensely as if it were about to explode, and points of light emanated from the modified human military core, connecting them together. Then, a magnetic storm spread like a vortex from the rapidly spinning mechanical arm.
Yilan's eyebrows twitched.
If he were swept away by the storm, it wouldn't be a problem that mere maneuvering could avoid.
Snap. Snap.
Yilan snapped his fingers twice in succession, one recalled his beloved vehicle, and the other, several hundred meters above his head, deployed the
Guangwei giant cannon. Snap.
With another crisp snap, Yilan fired his grappling hook, grabbing onto the Guangwei giant cannon just as the magnetic storm rushed towards him, swinging himself 1,000 meters into the air. The moment he grabbed the Guangwei giant cannon, Yilan immediately covered it with a surge of reverse power.
Activation. After a faint red glow, the Guangwei giant cannon opened its abyssal maw and fired an overloaded blast upwards. Good marksmanship. Zhao Ganghuang's booming voice praised again.
He curled himself up, instantly resembling a mechanical divine mountain, glowing a deep blue all over.
Boom! The Guanaway giant cannon tumbled in midair, aiming a shot directly at Zhao Gangawang's mechanical brain. Boom!
The cannon roared, and Yilan merely glanced at it before letting out a slight sigh.
Even a headshot leaves him unharmed? This really pushes defense to the limits of the wasteland.
What was even more troublesome was that this invulnerable tortoise shell also utilized the power of the ancient god's touch. And the power of the ancient god's touch was on par with his own, meaning that if he intended to use a finishing move like Devour, it would be
ineffective.
With a flicker in his eyes, as Yilan descended towards the city, stepping on the Guanaway giant cannon, he used the Guanaway giant cannon as a
leverage point to snap his fingers in midair. Snap!
The divine drive shimmered in midair, its body flowing with colorful light. Yilan grabbed a corner of its handlebar and settled steadily into the driver's seat in midair. This was the advantage of activation. No matter how complex the situation, it could always execute the optimal solution.
Tao Tao!
The moment he slammed the accelerator while suspended in the air, Yilan's voice vibrated, calling out to Bai Tao Tao, who was still inside the night house.
Whoosh!
Tentacles spread out, solidifying a stable environment. Bai Tao Tao leaped onto the roof of the night house in a few bounds, and under the meteor-like sky, she extended a slender finger between Yilan and
the mechanical arm.
A strange power spread through the air, and faint, shimmering tentacles gradually solidified. One side directly enveloped the arm of the mechanical colossus, while the other unfurled like a vine in the sky, creating a direct path to Yilan.
Bang!
The divine drive slammed heavily onto the tentacle path, its gears roaring as if they were about to fly off, and it continued to speed along the
tentacle path at an incredibly terrifying pace. How is this possible? Zhao Ganghuang finally showed a hint of panic in his voice.
The arm where the divine drive roared swung like a whirlwind, but this time, it failed to dislodge Yilan.
In the blink of an eye, 1,000 meters were covered. No! How did you do that?
Midway through, Zhao Ganghuang finally broke free from the layers of tentacles entangling him. A mechanical arm slammed violently onto the ground, and as it spun and rolled, it scraped the ground for hundreds of meters around, now resembling a fiery wheel, attempting only to fling or crush the increasingly close Yilan and his motorcycle.
Unfortunately, the divine drive's speed was always just a bit faster. Finally, Yilan reached its core. Snap!
Yilan fired his grappling hook, hooking onto its head, which was dozens of meters tall and wide. He swung across to the position where he could see Zhao Ganghuang sleeping through the transparent partition.
It's useless. My shell is invincible. Zhao Ganghuang roared, and that transparent partition actually descended like an elevator from the head, moving towards the heart. Damn it, don't run!
Yilan cursed, and with a swing of his grappling hook, he plummeted at full speed.
Click!
Before Yilan could find a new breakthrough point, Zhao Gangawang's mechanical neck suddenly opened a valve, and then hundreds of modified humans surged out of that valve. Each of them burst forth with divine drive-level linear speed, rushing over in a dense mass. Their firepower hummed, and cold glints flashed, as if forming a human iron net that completely surrounded Yilan without leaving any room. Yilan's gaze swept over them, and he narrowed his eyes.
These modified humans were very good-looking. Saying that might seem a bit out of place, but each of them could reach the level of Zhao Yuan. But you dare to open your core area in front of me? Snap! Whoosh!
Yilan maintained his momentum, recalled the divine drive, and charged forward alone. The moment they made contact, Yilan's entire body flowed with a faint blue glow, and then his whole being turned ethereal.
The power of the phantom expanse. The reason he rarely used it was because the consumption was just too damn high. Just by making himself ethereal like that, it actually consumed nearly twice the power of activation. Yilan didn't know why this was the case, but after analysis, he attributed it to his own reasons. The essence of his own power was too strong,
the consumption required to completely etherealize his body far exceeded that of anyone, even anomalies.
Boom!
In the last instant of etherealization, Yilan burrowed into the body of the mechanical colossus.
Intrusion detected. Intrusion detected. Area lockdown. Full area lockdown.
The moment he entered, the surroundings were filled with flashing red lights and sharp alarms. Countless gears spun wildly, and the area constantly reconfigured, instantly becoming a sealed chamber that trapped Yilan inside.
Bang!
Yilan pulled out the chaos bell and immediately fired a shot. He was a little disappointed but not entirely surprised. The wall was completely unharmed.
However, no matter how precise your gears are, you can defend against external force. Can you defend against gas? Can you defend against rottenness? Snap!
Yilan snapped his fingers once more, and 4 figures clad in rotten robes shimmered into existence. A squad of rotten god cult elites appeared around Yilan. Without much need for communication, rotten spiritual energy erupted within the mechanical colossus, and a black sapling was unceremoniously planted.
On the ground.
Hiss. In the blink of an eye, the entire colossus echoed with an uncomfortable corrosive sound, as it began to rot from the inside, little by little.
Watch your backs. Bang, 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 bang.
Yilan roared, not daring to waste time. He pulled out the chaos bell and fired the remaining 5 shots at the wall, completely breaking through the lockdown targeting him, and began to move within the body of the mechanical colossus.
Bang, bang, bang.
With 6 more consecutive shots, he pried open a gap, and Yilan saw the elevator still descending.
Snap!
The grappling hook swung, and Yilan swung through the narrow, dark elevator shaft, which sparked as it plummeted at full speed with Zhao
Gangwon's location, and his feet landed in the still descending square section. Bang, bang, bang.
4 shots hit the elevator's connection points, and the elevator carrying Zhao Gangwon's main body sparked as it uncontrollably plummeted to the
deepest part. Bang! Click! During this process, Yilan blasted open one side of the elevator, leaped inside, and placed the chaos bell on Zhao Gangwon's vessel, pointing directly at his temple. You really can run, can't you?
Yilan, like a killer who had pursued his target all the way, tilted his head slightly.
Now, is there anything you'd like to tell me? Outrageous possibilities.
The entire mechanical colossus paused, from the inside out, not daring to make the slightest movement. It seemed as if consciousness had shifted between the mechanical colossus and Zhao Gangwon's main body. After a few seconds, Zhao Gangwon, in the vessel, opened his eyes.
I am Zhao Gangwon. Bang!
Yilan's mouth twitched slightly, and he fired a shot at the vessel.
Finally, the invincible defense was no more. With one shot, a dense, spiderweb-like indentation appeared on the vessel. Wait! Wait a moment! I have something to say.
Zhao Gangwon sat up in a panic, and the colossus began to fall, as if it had lost control. He faced Yilan through the vessel.
Click!
He actually took the initiative to open the vessel's protective shield, perhaps realizing that the defense here was not enough to withstand the pistol
in Yilan's hand.
As he handed Yilan a strange chip that pulsed like a blood vessel, he spoke seriously. You cannot destroy this place, otherwise you won't be able to save Zhao Gangwon and Zhao Yuanyuan. Yilan was slightly stunned, almost amused by his attempt to blackmail him. However, this did not slow down his speed in taking the chip.
Are you being a little funny? Aren't those your children?
Hearing this, Zhao Gangwon showed an untimely, playful expression.
They are not my children in the true sense, just as I am not your true, you understand. Yilan? For once, he short-circuited. Do you want to hear what you're saying? Wait. Clap.
After the chip exchange was completed, the vessel in front of Zhao Gangwon slammed shut, and then he looked up at the radiant disk, letting out an
earth-shattering roar. Ancient God, save me.
Amidst a heartbreaking shout, he pressed another button in the palm of his other hand.
Whoosh! In the next instant, the head of the mechanical colossus split open. The vessel he was in, like an ejection capsule, shot out with a whoosh, emitting sparks, and then, like a rocket launch, soared into the sky, leaving a trail of dust. Boom! The escape pod grazed the head of the machine, piercing a large hole through all the obstructions above, and soared straight up towards the radiant disk. At this time, the radiant disk was no longer as ordinary as before. The entire building was like the eye of a formation suspended in a black storm, with dark clouds pressing down from above, enveloped by an incredibly strange power. A few tendril-like tentacles shot out from its four corners, pulling the flying Zhao Ganghuang to the position of the white light beam, slowly ascending into the radiant disk. Subsequently, those tentacles did not dissipate, but like fishtails, carried the radiant disk soaring through the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Hundreds of modified humans erupted with blue light from their feet, all launching themselves towards the radiant disk, momentarily resembling a dense barrage of missiles ascending into the sky, creating an extremely sci-fi scene. Where do you think you're going, meow? Big clumsy hand, hurry up and get bigger to catch them, meow. Wait! Yilan grabbed the excited Mind Cat and pulled him back onto his shoulder. Wait a moment, the situation has changed. Meow? The Mind Cat looked at Yilan in confusion, waiting for an explanation with great puzzlement. This Zhao family head might be. What the hell? Forget it, it's just a guess, but if he is, I'll beat him to death. Yilan cursed and pressed the intercom. Someone, bring Zhao Taihui and Zhao Yuan over. Upon hearing about the critically injured Zhao Taihui and Zhao Yuan, the Mind Cat immediately forgot to ask the previous question and became somewhat worried. Are you going to use this mechanical colossus to treat them, meow? He mused, isn't that a bit rash, meow? If. Don't panic. Yilan gritted his teeth, I discovered a whole new possibility that can explain all the questions I can't figure out right now. That's that some playful guy got carried away. Damn it. Before he could ask more, Arthur's communication came through. Divine Envoy, there are many modified humans here with low resistance, how should we deal with them? Yilan was silent for a moment, then looked up at the hundreds of modified humans ascending into the sky, and weighed his options. Zhao Ganghuang's confidants have all been taken away. As for the others, if they lay down their weapons, those who are innocent will not be prosecuted. Then, call the old doctor for me. Before long, the old doctor of Sewage Town timidly and furtively walked into the room where Yilan was. Yilan rolled his eyes impatiently, his voice quite annoyed. You come with me. The group proceeded along the passage, and before long, they returned to the brain of the mechanical colossus, the central hub of everything. Endless gears roared, and resistant agglomerates were scattered everywhere. In the central chamber, which resembled a brain, mechanical passages like blood vessels connected to it from all directions. Is this where consciousness is stored? The old doctor was engrossed, deep in thought. But whose consciousness is stored here? Yilan didn't know, and as he touched the chip Zhao Ganghuang had given him, a faint, abnormal power seeped into his body. Is this thing the same? The old doctor took it and looked at it, showing a somewhat troubled expression. From my observation, it should be. But I'm not sure. I'm a doctor, not an engineer. Yilan rolled his eyes and looked at the chip again. Is there a way to separate the power core and the control core within it? The old doctor was stunned and licked his lips. Ahem, if I can use the power of suturing, separation is too simple, it's just that you. Granted. Ah. The old doctor was stunned for a moment, then delightedly took the chip. What are you doing, meow? The Mind Cat asked curiously. I don't know. Yilan smiled, perhaps it's a key. Click, click. Stepping out of the mechanical colossus, Yilan returned to the ground. He looked up, and the entire radiant city was lighting up. However, it wasn't the brightness of dawn, but rather it lit up directly without the dawn phase. The surrounding buildings were also distinctly different, filled with an ancient aesthetic.
But it also seemed unstable, occasionally reverting to its original appearance.
This is...
Arthur rushed over, wasting no time, and immediately reported.
Xia Chengfei just contacted here. We are in a massive electromagnetic interference zone, unable to connect. From the message, they found that another peculiar space is overlapping with Radiant City, and the danger is unclear. He has already led people to hold the line, searching for and controlling the overlapping anchor points.
Memories of the past echoed in his mind, and Yilan narrowed his eyes slightly.
Li Jichuan, have you finally shown your fangs?
Yilan looked down. Nighthouse, after falling into the lower district, was crawling back onto Guangwei Road.
Yilan's grappling hook swung, landing on Nighthouse. Nighthouse. Never mind here, head towards Bai Mansion. Boom.
Nighthouse adjusted its direction and proceeded at full speed.
White House. Upper District, Bai Estate. Boom.
The Nighthouse was perched in front of the Bai Estate's main gate, firmly rooted to the ground. At this moment, the Bai Estate had completely transformed into a dark and eerie world. Ghostly figures flickered within, and malevolent power surged skyward from all directions. The entire Radiant City's power was not as strong as the
power emanating from this single location. Who?
Bai Tao Tao walked out from the main entrance of the Nighthouse, looking at the Bai Estate, her home, which she didn't know how familiar it was.
Feeling a little sad and a little disconsolate.
Both inside and outside the main gate had been sealed off by strange power, or rather, abnormal level strange power permeated all directions. Compared to the battle at the Zhao family just now, this would be a more familiar fighting style and a more direct battle. Outside the main gate, a patch of sunlight shimmered, where the elite Twilight God cult squad brought by Xia Qingfei was stationed.
Why are you still here?
Yilan stepped forward, asking in confusion. The Archbishop ordered us to stay here to support you.
The Twilight God cult captain saluted and stepped forward, saying.
Yilan frowned slightly, looking towards the radiant disk in the distance.
Is he going to deal with the dynasty himself?
Yes. The elite Twilight God cult squad captain nodded. Yilan's concern warmed his heart. He said not to worry, he would directly summon the promised arc after he had fixed his position. With the promised arc's level, suppressing the dynasty would not be a problem.
Yilan nodded gently. The promised arc was a true high-level anomaly. Divine Envoy.
Within the Eternal Night's encirclement, the Bai Estate's power surged even more fiercely, to the point where the Eternal Night Divine Church's
position almost needed to be described as weak.
Arthur Luocho drove rapidly, followed by dozens of fully loaded large flatbed trucks.
What's wrong?
This massive convoy from outside the city entered the city, unmanned.
Luocho panted urgently, there's only a letter on the trucks, saying these are reinforcements for you.
Yilan glanced, felt the fluctuations inside, shook his head gently, and opened the first carriage.
A cannon similar in size to the Guangwei giant cannon.
The difference was that this cannon platform's texture was almost impossible for humans to create. The interior of the cannon platform was completely hollow, seemingly entirely for storing energy, with only a cannon-shaped shell on the outside.
From a physical perspective, this thing shouldn't be able to fire shells. But from an anomalous perspective. Man, try this, can you use it?
Ha! Xiao Man looked at the box, which was bigger than herself, and was clearly stunned for a moment.
My equipment is custom-made.
Yilan smiled softly and nodded.
I know, so try it.
Xiao Man, with a hint of strangeness, placed her hand on the box, half believing, half doubting.
Then, her eyes became incredibly bright. It really works.
Yilan smiled and waved his hand.
Unload the trucks.
The Eternal Night Divine Church's elites opened the carriages of the subsequent dozen or so flatbed trucks, and then their eyes truly couldn't close.
Mist blue coins. Dense, seemingly endless mist blue coins.
Without saying anything more, Yilan and Xiao Man already knew what these were for.
Sent by the god of mist?
Yilan nodded, already using the formless hand to help transport them, and for a time, it truly looked like a mountain of gold was piled beside Xia.
Man.
In a short while, a power that even Yilan felt threatened by had already emanated from this cannon platform.
Calibrate, by estate main entrance.
With everything ready, Yilan calmly issued the battle command.
Xia Manman took a deep breath, with a hint of excitement.
She had truly never fought such a rich battle.
Boom! With a thunderous roar, as the cannon boomed, it seemed as if heaven and earth were torn open with a crack.
The eerie by estate's layers of defense seemed to be non-existent, and its strange gate and wall were directly blown apart. The sound, like a coin dropping, was both crisp and comforting, and it made Yilan's heart ache a little. This was truly, when the cannon roars, gold is 10,000 taels.
Fire again. Boom, boom, boom.
Endless strange power continuously surged towards the gate and wall, constantly filling the gap in the main entrance, but in this roar, it finally exploded into an unhealable large hole. Charge! The moment the opponent's main entrance was blown apart, Yilan waved his hand, leading by Tao Tao and several hand-picked elite squads to charge in. Arthur Luocho each led an elite Eternal Night Divine Church squad, and 3 Rotten God Cult squads and 1 Twilight God Cult squad followed closely
behind. Whoosh!
The moment they rushed into the Bai estate, the hole that had just been blasted open behind them was once again replenished by strange power, slowly
closing and sealing Yilan and his several elite squads inside.
Of course, it was still unknown who had surrounded whom. Man, stay where you are, wait for my message, and bomb at any time.
Yes. The moment the communication ended, the entire Bai estate was completely enveloped in darkness. Endless darkness.
Within the darkness, an even darker thick mist spread, covering everything around them. The squads all turned on their flashlights and all lighting equipment, but even so, they couldn't even illuminate the faces of their closest
teammates. Puff. Clap.
Yilan frowned slightly, only feeling a violent and strange fluctuation, like an earthwalker, piercing through, then appearing in the darkness, suddenly stabbing an elite of the Rotten God cult. Yilan turned his head slightly, fired a shot with his small chaos bell in his left hand, and shot out his grappling hook with his right hand, repelling the strange figure with a bang, and allowing the elite of the Rotten God cult to narrowly avoid a vital spot. The thick mist deepened, and people could barely feel their companions standing beside them.
The entire Bai estate seemed to have transformed into a forest that devoured life. There's a violent fluctuation.
Bai Tao Tao, whose power was homogeneous in many aspects, changed her expression drastically and gave a warning to the nearest Yilan.
Prepare for battle.
Yilan shouted, threw the illusory blade to Bai Tao Tao, and turned on his petrifying flashlight.
Hundreds of figures, whose power was already close to anomalous, rushed over.
Strange tentacles came from all directions, covering the sky and sun, as if they had transformed into the giant maw of a whale. The explosive power at this moment actually felt like a casual blow from the ancient god's touch. Yilan narrowed his eyes, knowing that such an attack could not be allowed to strike in this situation, and extended his hand.
Eternal Night.
Surging psionic energy gushed out from all directions.
The Bai estate was no longer a monotonous darkness but transformed into a deep blue like the eternal night. Try it.
Under the illumination of the eternal night, the thick fog dissipated considerably, and everything around them finally revealed its true appearance.
Albeit vaguely. This made it much easier to fight. Boom!
Tens of thousands of tentacles, carrying murderous intent and the power to assimilate everything, surged forward like a torrent and a bombardment.
With an unstoppable momentum, as if to destroy everything in their path. Defense.
Several small teams formed their respective formations, and their ability objects and firepower surged out, barely managing to defend themselves. Bai Tao Tao gritted her teeth, her power becoming increasingly responsive to her will, and a strange force surged forth. More powerful tentacles spread across the sky and earth, like a cocoon, completely encircling this group of people. The two forces collided and merged, and for a moment, Bai Tao Tao's expression flickered between light and shadow.
Swish!
Bai Tao Tao's cocoon was directly pierced by a small hole, and it dissolved on all sides like a thin film. Her face turned pale, she staggered back several steps, spat out a large mouthful of blood, and fell to the ground.
Yi Lan's expression changed slightly.
He took the illusory blade from Bai Taotao's hand and slashed towards the strange storm that had broken through the cocoon. In an instant, threads of tentacles rained down. This was no longer just the power of the illusory blade, but the true illusory power, formed by the previous tentative use of the phantom expanses. Power and partial absorption of the phantom expanse.
Rumble, rumble, rumble.
At the distant end, the rumbling continued, as if a giant was striding forward. At the end of the gray fog, a gloomy figure, dozens of meters tall and gaunt like a zombie, slowly became visible in the darkness, emitting strange
phantoms all over its body. Combined with the thick fog, it sent an indescribable chill down one's spine.
It was neither human nor god, like the phantom of an ancient god.
Its legs alone were towering, and each step seemed to infect everything around it.
Countless tentacles swayed with it, as if worshipping their king. In front of the strange giant, an ordinary human walked slowly, his steps in sync. He was dressed in white, walking forward step by step, and the phantom behind him was like his doppelganger, becoming clearer and closer. Finally, Yi Lan saw the face of the figure. Dressed in white, with majesty tinged with the vicissitudes of life. He looked directly at Yi Lan, his gaze burning.
Bai Zhuahai.
He and Yi Lan looked at each other, as if countless years had passed.
Father.
Bai Taotao's expression was complex, but after a few shifts in her eyes, she still resolutely stood by Yi Lan's side.
It had nothing to do with anything else. She disliked the current Bai family, she disliked such a home. She didn't yearn for justice, only for light.
Everything felt unfamiliar, except, the other party was indeed her father.
Did this Bai family still look familiar at all? His power, the strange phantom behind him, did he really still resemble a human? Actually, I don't seem to be too much like one anymore either. Everyone has their own destiny. But at least.
She looked at Yi Lan.
I'm still standing on the side of justice, aren't I? Boom.
Bai Zhuahai stretched out his hand, and the strange giant phantom behind him also stretched out its hand. The strange spiritual power stirred up a chilling storm, and the right arm, condensed from tentacles, was like intertwined tree roots, carrying a
scarlet and evil aura as it smashed towards Yi Lan.
That power followed like a shadow, as if it had the ability to shatter space, appearing before Yi Lan in an instant, and seemingly locked on, giving a
feeling of inescapable doom. The intensity is increasing. Whoosh!
The captain of the Rotten God Cult's elite squad quickly stepped forward, took out a rotten tree seedling, which looked even somewhat withered, stored in a container, and flung it towards the strange root.
Request divine. Boom!
With his shout, powered by his spiritual energy, a terrifying wave of air came from beneath the ground, pouring into the seedling from all directions.
And for a time, the seedling grew uncontrollably and vigorously. Strange power spread everywhere, and the sapling quickly grew into a towering giant tree.
One of the thickest branches twisted and spread, directly catching the strange giant hand of the phantom, and the branches layered upon layer,
entwining around it. Boom!
The rotten seedling and the tentacles intertwined, bound, and entangled, using the arm transformed by the phantom behind Bai Zhuahai as a battlefield. Layering upon layer, forming a state where you were in me, and I was in you.
Request divine.
At the moment when these two forces crisscrossed, the Twilight God Cult's elite squad was not to be outdone, stepping forward and throwing out a
brilliant object, like an ability object, resembling a firefly. It quickly rose into the sky, grew, getting bigger and bigger, until it turned into a sun-like fireball. The fireball shone with pure light, becoming the only light under the eternal night. The entire Bai family mansion became illuminated, and the vision was completely clear. Behind Bai Zhuahai and the phantom, there was a towering pillar of light exuding an evil aura. One hand of the phantom behind Bai Zhuahai was completely bound by the rotten seedling, pressed to the ground with immense weight, and even Bai Zhuahai's body was in the same posture, one hand pressed firmly to the ground. His human form body strained to straighten, raising his unbound arm and waving his hand. Hundreds of Bai family figures, enhanced by gene enhancement and close to abnormality, retreated, leaving only the confronting Yi Lan and Bai Zhuahai. In the courtyard. The rotten tree paves the way for you, and the pure remnant sun illuminates for you, Baizhuahai said in a powerful, distant, and emotional voice. You are just as you were back then, making one feel mysterious and unfathomable. The familiar voice finally appeared, and Yilan finally smiled. So, you still want to try? Of course, I want to try. His voice was incredibly resolute, and he suddenly raised his head. Boom! Baizhuahai was still hundreds of meters away from Yilan, yet he threw his uncontrolled and unbound left fist. Boom! The giant phantom behind him, accompanied by a strong wind, maintained the exact same movement as him, throwing its left fist, which was as long as the entire diameter of the Bai family mansion, gaunt, and seemingly fused with various energies. With one punch, the wind and clouds changed, and the gloom of the entire Bai family mansion vanished, leaving only Baizhuahai's near-total, all-out strike, sweeping through everything as far as the eye could see. Holy meow! The mind cat instantly completely hid inside Yilan's body, exclaiming, "What in the world have they created, meow? Why do I feel like the ancient god's touch is hitting me, meow?" The giant fist swung, and wherever it passed, space seemed to be fixed, making everything unable to move. It looked incredibly slow, yet it seemed to have locked onto its target, not only making movement impossible but also leaving no place to hide. It seemed to be infinitely enlarged in an incredibly small space, as if the sky was falling. Formless hand. The formless hand was taken off Yilan's hand and thrown onto the ground at his feet. Boom! Understanding the intention, the moment it landed, the formless hand began to grow, growing wildly, as if becoming infinitely large, until it was level with the terrifying and strange phantom. Even outside the distant Radiant City, one could see a towering giant hand growing from the center of Radiant City. It cradled Yilan in its palm, ascending hundreds of meters high, facing that punch from afar. And Yilan stood on top of the 100-meter-tall formless hand, meeting the punch. Rotten spear. Put. The scene that everyone viewed as an almost certain defeat, like an egg hitting a rock, completely froze, emitting a crisp cracking sound. But the sound of the egg in that impossible clash actually came from the giant, sky-covering arm. Put. Baizhuahai spewed a mouthful of fresh blood, staggering back several steps, almost falling to the ground. The arm on the same side as the giant hand hung limply, as if dislocated, dropping to the ground. Wham! A grappling hook swung, Yilan leaped, and after a few swings, landed in front of Baizhuahai. Patriarch. Hundreds of Bai family guards, whose strength was nearing the abnormal level, were about to rush forward, but Baizhuahai waved his hand, stopping them. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, suppressed the restless, strange psionic energy within his body, and met Yilan's gaze. After a long moment, he let out a bitter laugh. So you're this strong. I still can't beat you. Yilan looked at him expressionlessly. He had to admit that even now, he still couldn't quite grasp Baizhuahai's attitude and motives. I've waited for you for too long. Listening to such a remark, which even held a hint of resentment, Yilan raised an eyebrow. The next moment, Baizhuahai suddenly turned his head, pointed towards the towering pillar of light behind him, and let out a full-throated roar, as if even the radiant disk in the sky would hear him. Destroy those two potions. Yilan was slightly startled, but the Bai family elites had already surged forward. Wham! No matter how fast they were, they couldn't be faster than the formless hand. Wham! Without time to put on his gloves, Yilan directly commanded the formless hand remotely. Its giant, gradient-colored hand pointed remotely towards the pillar of light, its thumb and forefinger pressed together. Wham! After a crisp sound, the pillar of light vanished, and whatever was inside it had already been taken in by the formless hand. Not good. Retreat quickly. Baizhuahai, terrified, looked up and shouted with a trembling voice. Ancient God, save me. Boom! The radiant disk moved again, and its surging power finally unleashed itself without concealment at the last moment, a mighty aura sweeping into the Bai mansion like a gale. In an instant, Baizhuahai and the many gene-enhanced elites of the Bai family seemed to receive some kind of fundamental blessing, ascending at full speed, rushing towards the radiant disk as if flying. Yilan watched, unmoving. Brother Yilan, meow. Stop them, meow. The mind cat cried out anxiously. These guys have preserved their strength quite well, meow. If they really escape up there, wouldn't all our efforts be in vain, meow? Yilan listened to its words and finally showed a faint smile. I guess the ancient god's touch thinks so too. Meow? The Bai mansion gradually returned to calm. The various strange powers seemed to dissipate with Bai Zhuahai and the gene enhancer's departure in dissolution, briefly returning to its former appearance. Was it a complete victory? No. Bai Taotao sat on the ground, somewhat dazed, hugging her knees. But why? Looking in the direction where Bai Zhuahai disappeared, Yilan glanced at Bai Taotao, sighed softly, and revealed a smile. Don't panic, maybe there's still a twist? A twist? Bai Taotao gave a sad smile, leaning gently against Yilan, taking it as mere comfort. What other twist could there be? Leaving home on such an ordinary night, just doing a gene enhancement on such an ordinary day, it seemed she never truly went home to see it again. That day of eternal night dawn didn't count, because she was completely overwhelmed by sorrow. And then, she never expected that it was truly the last time she would return. It's all going to end, isn't it? Why don't you stay and rest for a bit? The Bai family here also needs to be dealt with now, Yilan said, deliberating. No. Bai Taotao gradually recovered, gritting her teeth, I can help you now. Yilan suddenly thought of the 2 pillars of light he had obtained at the last moment and nodded gently. Good. Boom. Before any further communication, the ground trembled violently. As Bai Zhuahai and the surrounding darkness departed, the environment around them became even more bizarre. It was as if the entire upper district was transforming into a dynasty. Everywhere Yilan looked, he could even see many rooms subtly turning into stone. Radiant City is becoming more and more unstable. Yilan murmured, swinging to the top of the Bai family building, looking as far as he could. The center from which all this shaking came, the center of the upper district, beneath the radiant disk, had actually transformed into the appearance of a palace. It was the violet forbidden peak he was familiar with. It's already starting to transform into a dynasty? Yilan frowned deeply. The situation over there didn't seem too good. The dynasty was the last threshold before the decisive battle with the ancient god's touch. Boom! Suddenly, the entire area beneath the radiant disk, like a mirage, revealed a colossal, dreamlike ship, hundreds of meters high, both illusory and real. That thing flickered in and out of existence in the air, just like the dynasty, seemingly gradually appearing in the real world. It seemed to be tearing through layers of space, using the air as waves, like a moving lighthouse. Its sharp and powerful bow, calibrated in direction, charged forward relentlessly, breaking through obstacles and crashing into the magnificent violet forbidden peak. It caused ripples in the surrounding space. Even before contact, the dynasty had already begun to disappear little by little. It was as if, the moment it fully descended, it could completely expel the dynasty and restore Radiant City to its original, stable state. Promised Arkansas. Yilan stood with his hands behind his back in the biting winter wind, gazing at this magnificent spectacle, feeling a sense of vastness and epic scale, as if he were at the heart of a historical storm. It's still putting in a lot of effort, meow. The mind cat couldn't help but exclaim. At the moment of decisive battle, all parties were gathering, becoming more and more complete. Beep beep. Just then, Yilan's communicator suddenly rang. He was inexplicably stunned for a moment, because all his core people were currently by his side, and it seemed no one needed to specifically use the communicator. Lowering his head slightly to look, Yilan once again felt a strong sense of unease. It was Lin Zhao. But for some reason, he quietly let out a sigh of relief. She could still make a call, at least she wasn't dead. Beep. The communication connected, and before Yilan could say anything, Lin Zhao's sobbing voice came through directly. Yilan! 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 Yilan frowned.
I'm here, tell me.
What's wrong? Yilan. Ha? Yilan was completely bewildered for the first time today. What the hell? Is this Lin Jiao? Lin Jiao can cry?
The breathless voice continued to come through, but the signal seemed to be getting bad, becoming more and more intermittent.
I didn't do it. I really didn't do it. This wasn't done by the main god either. Beep.
The communication completely cut off at that instant.
It suddenly cut off, not hung up, but...
Device malfunction, this frequency band does not exist. The communicator kept ringing intermittently, and Yilan was truly stunned.
What is it? What is it saying? What does frequency band does not exist mean?
Yilan suddenly looked up, towards the location of the promised ark, and a faint sense of unease slowly emerged. At this moment, beneath the radiant disk, it was as if space itself was shattering, as if it were about to fall from reality into an abyss. Countless terrifying auras, intertwined with spatial fluctuations, layered together. There were those from the radiant disk, those from the dynasty, and those from the promised ark.
No! Yi Lan's pupils contracted.
There was a fourth spatial fluctuation. Even higher than the radiant disk, endless thunderclouds began to be peeled back by something, little by little revealing a pure black spear beneath.
Carrying a rotten aura.
The spear, with only its tip exposed, hung high in the sky like a space-based sword, brewing a chilling power.
Not good. Yi Lan's expression changed drastically. He leaped directly from the dozens of meters high experimental building and rushed onto the street.
In midair, Yilan had no time to leave any instructions. He summoned his divine drive, settled in, and twisted the throttle in one smooth motion, charging madly towards the area beneath the radiant disk.
Rotten spear. Falling.
Under the radiant disk, on the ground of the upper district, Xia Qingfei and Li Zichuan faced each other in a standoff. The changing of the world had become the norm, it seemed nothing could surprise them anymore. Such a scene was a first even for Xia Qingfei, a Grand Inquisitor whose combat experience was among the most extensive in the Twilight God cults. History. Only this time, the new power that intervened was too strong, and he couldn't help but frown and raise his head.
Rotten spear?
He murmured to himself. Normally, this would be a major event that would put the entire Twilight God cult on edge and on high alert, but this time was slightly different.
The opponent was the ancient god's touch.
This was a matter that the main god had specifically emphasized, requiring one of the 5 gods to be present, and all factions to set aside their
differences and go all out. Boom!
Thunder rumbled overhead, and the rotten spear appeared intermittently, as if gathering its final strength. It carried an increasingly terrifying power, so vast that even the radiant disk seemed to tremble.
Boom!
Finally, the rotten spear, like a sword drawn from its sheath, streaked across the sky, descending from above, its surging power unleashed. The world changed color, and the sky seemed to shatter into pieces in that instant. It was like a meteor crashing from the sky, descending from above, capable of piercing through everything in its path.
Wherever the spear tip pointed, there was only void.
The radiant disk visibly and violently writhed, tentacles emerging from all directions, paddling with all their might like oars to move away.
Boom!
The rotten spear, which seemed capable of piercing through heaven and earth, finally descended from the sky like an arrow released from a bowstring. It was unstoppable, plummeting at full speed, passing the radiant disk which had made way, but it did not bypass the promised ark, which was still
half illusory further below. It simply pierced straight through. Boom!
A terrifying shockwave erupted from their collision, a power comparable to a sewing doll's self-detonation, pouring out and radiating in all directions, instantly shattering nearly half of the high-rise buildings in the upper district.
The promised ark, which hadn't even fully descended, was pierced through entirely, half of its body's light extinguished.
The sky was filled with uncontrolled, overflowing psionic aftershocks, and the promised ark completely lost control, plummeting towards the ground. It was like a plane hit by a missile, burning with fire, falling.
Boom!
Yilan, who was rushing towards the radiant disk with all his might, could clearly see the scene above his head, almost completely frozen, only able to grit his teeth and desperately twist the accelerator. Just a little faster, a little faster. Xiao Qingfei was also stunned, staring blankly at the scene that looked like the sky was falling. The fall of the promised ark. Finally, he came to his senses, gritting his teeth tightly.
Row 10.
All the light on his body disappeared, and he grabbed the communicator.
Promised ark, withdraw immediately. Stop pulling towards the beacon location immediately.
Soon, a reply came through.
Can't do it. Positioning capability destroyed. The promised ark is mentally unstable, spreading pollution uncontrollably. We need time. Time. I'll do it. Xiao Qingfei gritted his teeth, and a brilliant golden light emanated from his entire body. Then, he actually simulated the aura of the promised ark. Having completely pierced the promised ark, the rotten spear had been suspended in mid-air. Suddenly, another full-powered aura came, and it seemed to hesitate for a moment, then erupted with a piercing sound of tearing through the air again, smashing down at Xiao Qingfei from mid-air. You dare to try and kill him?
Yilan finally rushed to an infinitely close distance, his entire body's psionic vibrations giving power to his voice, which carried for thousands of
meters.
The vast sound echoed in layers, and the rotten spear actually paused for a moment. But whether it intended to change its target or not, it was already a little too late. At the last moment, it slightly adjusted its direction, aiming at Li Zichuan. The ferocious long spear stabbed down, first passing through Xiao Qingfei at a position slightly off his heart, then piercing all the way through Li
Zichuan, finally impaling both of them and nailing them to the ground.
The moment Li Zichuan was pierced, the entire dynasty trembled even more violently than the promised ark, and then, like shards of glass, it shattered
all over the ground. Damn it!
Yilan finally arrived, flying, and directly jumped off his divine drive, striding over.
Be careful, meow. The rotten spear's state isn't quite right, meow. Does that even need to be said?
Yilan's face was ashen, and he rushed over with killing intent in his eyes. But before he could even get close, another terrifying power had condensed above his head at some unknown time, and then a surging force emanated from it. Yilan looked up. Another huge long spear had already condensed directly beneath the radiant disk. That long spear was covered in tentacles, exuding an aura no less powerful than a single strike from the rotten spear, appearing even more bizarre and
chilling.
Yilan looked at the already dying promised ark, urgently adjusted his direction, leaped up, stepped onto the half-illusory, half-real promised ark, adjusted direction again, and bravely rose to meet the bizarre long spear.
Wake up! Go!
Yilan's roar finally salvaged a sliver of the promised ark's sanity. It used its last strength, its body becoming even more illusory, slowly fading
into the night sky of Radiant City.
The bizarre long spear descending from the radiant disk finally smashed down, and Yilan reached out, directly grasping the spear's blade. Although grabbing a spear with one's hand might sound a bit foolish, it was the most effective and convenient way.
For him and the ancient god's touch, their struggle was usually a psionic one. Besides direct grabbing, how else could he ensure the target was himself?
Even 30 years ago, the most effective plan designed by the ancient god's touch was to stab himself with a bizarre dagger. Then, a struggle he thought he would surely win unfolded.
Puff!
Yilan and the ancient god's touch's powers fully connected, and he violently spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood.
Thank you, boss, for saving me.
Yilan seemed to faintly hear the promised ark's last voice in his ear. When he looked back, the figure of the promised ark had completely dissipated,
leaving Radiant City. Whoosh!
The tentacle spear's single strike, upon contact, caused such a backlash that even the radiant disk swayed precariously. As the radiant disk stopped supplying power, it gradually turned into nothingness. Yilan ignored it completely, abruptly turning his head, but the rotten spear had also disappeared during that time. Gritting his teeth, Yilan landed on the ground, spitting out another mouthful of clotted blood. Without saying anything, he quickly went to Xiao Qingfei's side. After checking the injuries, Yilan's emotions were complex. he was both relieved and frowned even deeper. The rotten spear's final strike missed his heart, but not by much. He was, after all, a mortal body, and his entire being was being permeated by the purest and most fervent rotten chi. This power had already penetrated to his heart, and his entire body emitted black gas and a decaying aura, making his situation extremely precarious. Taking a deep breath, Yilan once again picked up the walkie-talkie, calling Lin Jiao. Frequency does not exist. Frequency does not exist. Closing his eyes, Yilan then called the Rotten God Cult's external public frequency.
No signal on frequency. No signal on frequency. Beep beep.
In this extremely oppressive atmosphere, Yilan's communicator rang on its own. Yilan lowered his head and took a look. It wasn't Lin Jiao. But it was the call he least knew what to say to at this moment.
Xia Qingyu. Coming soon.
After a few seconds of silence, Yilan finally answered the call.
Hello? Yilan?
Amidst the silence, Xia Qingyu's voice, betraying no emotion, came again.
Is he still alive? For now.
She understood perfectly well what Yilan meant by for now.
Give the phone to Man.
Okay. Yilan walked over to the others who had rushed there and found Xia Man, who was completely stiff. Your sister.
Ah.
Xia Man was still dazed, perhaps unable to fully grasp what had happened for a moment. It wasn't until she took the phone that she seemed to revive from her static state, her voice gaining some coherence.
Sister. Brother he. But. I understand.
Yilan kept his gaze fixed on the radiant disk, his face devoid of joy, anger, sorrow, or happiness, not knowing what they discussed. The communicator returned to Yilan's hand. Yilan glanced at her, seeing no resentment, only grievance and unconcealed sadness. It has nothing to do with me, and I didn't expect it either.
I know.
Xia Qingyu responded with no change in her emotions. When something like this happened, anyone might suspect the Eternal Night Divine Church was the mastermind. But anyone who knew Yilan also knew he would never do such a thing. It wasn't Lin Jiao who did it, and it might not even be the Rotten God Cult's intention. Yilan gambled on Xia Qingyu's rationality, which she had possessed all along, and offered his speculation in a way that wasn't quite a defense. This time, the communicator was silent for a long time before Xia Qingyu once again gave a response that Yilan didn't find surprising. I know.
That too. Yilan was stunned. You know?
I don't trust her, but I do understand her somewhat, Xia Qingyu said softly. So I know that no matter how much she wants to kill someone from our Twilight God cult, she wouldn't ruin your plans at a time like this for her own selfish desires. Yilan fell silent. But it has already happened, and it cannot be changed, Xia Qingyu said calmly. I apologize.
Yilan fell silent. I should be the one to apologize.
It doesn't matter anymore, Xia Qingyu's voice grew calmer and calmer.
At most, I'll leave Man with you.
All Twilight God cult teams currently in Radiant City will withdraw immediately.
The promised Ark is severely injured, almost dead, and cannot go anymore.
The main god has not issued a new divine revelation to this day, and other anomalies will not be pursued either.
Yilan fell silent. We will publicly declare war on the Rotten God cult throughout the wasteland. The announcement will be issued immediately.
I hope the Eternal Night Divine Church takes care of itself and doesn't take sides at this time, Xia Qingyu sighed softly. I'm already helping you suppress public opinion. After all, the most likely culprit for such a large trap is the Eternal Night Divine Church. Yilan was silent for a moment, then finally spoke.
Are you safe?
Xia Qingyu was stunned for a moment, and her calm expression finally showed a hint of emotion, almost losing control of her tear ducts.
Are you crazy? What could happen to me?
This time, going to Radiant City to quell the four great families and attack the ancient god's touch was your brother's faction, overpowering the Pope's faction. It was a do-or-die situation, Yilan stated matter-of-factly. But now the symbol of the Twilight God cult, the promised Ark, is severely damaged, and your brother's life hangs by a thread.
If I were the Pope, I'm afraid I would immediately move against you. First, they would use you as a test, then Xia Tianan. Xia Qingyu sighed, thank you for your concern. My ambition is not here. I cannot help with the ancient god's touch. Yilan nodded. Keep your brother with me for now. His uncertain fate might make your Pope hesitate for a while, but if he returns half dead, they might truly go all out. Xia Qingyu was completely unable to control her tear ducts. But she could only be strong. Then that's it. She paused. I wish you well. You must win. Beep. The call ended, and the cold wind was bleak. Yilan looked up. Above his head was the strange, swirling vortex of the ancient god's touch. Where are the rotten god cult people? Yilan turned his head and looked at Arthur. They vanished into thin air. He also realized something serious had happened and said in a deep voice. How did they disappear? They were with us, rushing here at full speed, and then suddenly vanished. Yilan narrowed his eyes. How are Zhao Taihui and Zhao Yuanyuan? Zhao Taihui can already make sounds and should be recovering soon. Zhao Yuanyuan still shows no reaction, it seems the original plan hasn't changed much. Yilan exhaled a breath of stale air, looked at Li Jichuan's corpse, and suddenly his gaze sharpened. He half-knelt, picked up 2 fragments beside Li Jichuan, and pondered. Then, he stood up. Zhao Taihui stays put. If possible, let him try to master more power. Box up Zhao Yuanyuan and bring her over. Yilan looked around at the people surrounding him and slowly spoke. Lu Zhang, Tao Tao, you two take Zhao Yuanyuan and follow me onto the radiant disk. His gaze lingered on Xia Manman, pausing for a moment. You take your brother to the night house. My people will do everything possible to treat him. Xia Manman nodded blankly. Although the situation had changed dramatically, the Eternal Night Church's efficiency was still very high. Soon, Zhao Yuanyuan was brought over. Let's go. Su Lezhang and Bai Taodao silently followed behind Yilan, stepping onto the white light pillar of the radiant disk together. Meow. The mind cat's mood also carried a hint of suppression. Are you okay, Meow? What could happen to me? Yilan chuckled lightly, his gaze sweeping over Su Lezhang and Bai Taodao. It's just that in the end, it's us again. The 3 ascended in a straight line on the white light pillar. The radiant disk slowly opened its valve, sucking the 3 figures inside. Come and fight. Ancient God's touch. Lord of the world. Floating slowly upwards with the white pillar of light, Yilan gradually forgot all distracting thoughts. Whether it was 30 years ago or 30 years later. All the groundwork, all the preparations, finally came to this last step. Uncover all doubts, resolve all mysteries, and then face to face once more, and settle everything. Thump. Crack, crack, crack. As the white pillar of light reached its peak, Yilan once again stood on solid ground, completely in the center of the radiant disk, at the very location where the ancient god's touch was once imprisoned. With his arrival, the white pillar of light began to dissipate, and the valve beneath his feet started to close. His gaze swept around. This was clearly a place he had been before, yet at this moment, looking around, he felt, for some unknown reason, that it had become much wider. On both sides, people from the Bai family and Zhao family gathered. They were naturally led by Bai Zhuahai and Zhao Ganghuang, filling both wings of the hall, yet it remained incredibly spacious. It was still not crowded here. In the very center of the hall, the sapling of the ancient god's touch had fully unfurled. It was a complete form Yilan had never witnessed before. Majestic, profound, vast, ancient. It was entrenched there, and for a moment, it vaguely made one feel like the king of the world. Most critically, Yilan could not confirm if attacking the visible main body could truly harm it. It seemed to have merged with everything around it. Everything was it. You finally came, 001. It emitted a vast and ancient voice, nearly brushing past Yilan. It brought waves of spiritual energy erosion and itching. However, Yilan wasn't sure if it was because it had played Li Jixin for too long,
or if it still vaguely carried a touch of Li Jixin's flavor. Listening to this codename and the ancient god's touch's tone, Bai Zhuahai imperceptibly glanced at Yilan.
Yes, it's been 30 years.
Yilan no longer hid anything from Su Lezhang and Bai Taotao, smiling softly. 30 years, your confidence has indeed
grown quite a bit. Why not?
The ancient god's touch's vast voice chuckled, and for a moment, ghostly shadows flickered, its countless tentacles and roots all seemed to
be making laughing motions. It pointed at Su Lezhang and Bai Taotao.
I don't even know why you brought them here. If a wolf king spends all his days with a flock of sheep, he'll turn into a sheep too. Yilan chuckled softly, not answering him. Seeing Yilan remain silent, the ancient god's touch was genuinely enthusiastic at this moment. You're truly learning more and more of human civilization's bad habits, such as raising a tiger to cause trouble. To this day, I still don't understand why, when I was on my last breath 30 years ago, you decisively left.
Yet today, when I am about to return to my peak, to break through barriers and shackles, you return? Are you here to be my stepping stone, to witness the historic moment of my rise?
Yilan finally curled his lips.
You can't figure it out, can you? Then everything has gone too smoothly for me. Because I've figured everything out. So,
Yilan pointed at Bai Zhuahai, Zhao Ganghuang, and the two mighty military corps behind them, showing ridicule to the ancient god's touch.
Wolf King, you've been talking for half a day. What are you doing here, commanding the flock of sheep to attack me? Ha 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 ha.
The ancient god's touch let out a roar that seemed to shatter souls, and an eerie power began to spread, its form starting to ascend.
Aren't these the humans you protected with all your might, even going against me?
I want you to watch as they, instead, help me, and then slowly defeat you.
You will die beneath the world you guarded. Boom! Without any further concealment, the power of the ancient god's touch erupted, like mountains and seas, surging towards Yilan from all directions. It seemed to possess an unexplainable penetrative force, seeping into Yilan's body through every pore. An eerie sensation brushed his face. Yilan's clone protected Su Lezhang and Bai Taotao from the pressure, letting out a sneer. I thought you'd play some tricks, but you're still so weak.
Just, like this?
He.
The ancient god's touch's power howled.
Haven't you noticed? I've given the 4 core elements of my power to them.
With their help, my power has grown more robust, developing in a more unique way. Now is the time for me to merge them into myself, to create a stronger me. It began to float, its form becoming increasingly ethereal, making it difficult for Yilan to grasp, as if it had already merged into this world. From outside Radiant City was already filled with countless translucent ancient gods' phantoms, filling the entire city.
001. You are too inflexible. You possess a powerful intrinsic strength, yet unlike me, you don't boldly develop it. Without drawing from the human world, you are destined only for defeat.
Yilan saw the screen within the radiant disk again, which had originally only covered half a side. It turned out that the radiant disk hadn't grown larger, but rather the screen was no longer confined to half a room. In fact, imperceptibly, after he came up, it had already encompassed the entire radiant city.
I am the origin.
Its voice was vast, slowly floating up, emitting strange energy fluctuations. Everything around it twisted, shadows flickered, and as colors dimmed, it seemed to begin transforming into hell. I am the source of souls, the master of consciousness. I am the heart of the dynasty, I am the lord of the world.
Boom!
Wild power slammed against the radiant disk. That power, like a formatting brush, reconstructed and rendered everything around it. The entire radiant city began to change, all familiar sights began to disappear, transforming into a, still somewhat familiar place.
The dynasty.
However, this time, the dynasty no longer showed the somewhat thriving scene of the past. It divided all the remnants of Radiant City like livestock into various large areas, and an invisible line seemed to extend from the top of everyone's head, transmitting something unknown to the ancient gods.
Touch. Everything is my creation. Tens of thousands of powers transformed into phantoms, and these phantoms in turn became countless shadows of the ancient god's touch, all spreading across the sky. Boom! At that instant, the radiant disk shattered, completely pulverized. Foolish cage! It let out an angry roar, seemingly wanting to shout out all its indignation, to be reborn. The radiant disk no longer existed. The last remaining power of the radiant disk kept everyone suspended in mid-air, directly standing in the air, able to see the entire radiant city transformed into the dynasty. It must be hard, right? You've destroyed the dynasty twice, but in reality, the dynasty is a form of power. The moment they researched it, this would become mine, a power I could wield anytime, anywhere. The ancient god's touch manipulated its power, and the entire dynasty also began to press in on Yilan from all directions. Ah, the dynasty! The ancient god's touch seemed to be taking a deep breath of the wonderful air, though what it was actually inhaling remained unknown. The most interesting thing about humans is that they can create some words that even I quite like. For example, it itself was like the master of the world, and when this world was the dynasty, he had completely become an omnipotent master. He pointed at Yilan, and endless power, like 1,000 tons, sought to press Yilan down to his knees. Reign over the world. Yilan was originally poised to meet the enemy, but he almost broke his composure with that one sentence. He looked up at the ancient god's touch with a strange expression. You created a dynasty, did it mess with your head? Or is it that after being separated from your main body, your intelligence couldn't keep up? You and I are both guests. Ancient god's touch paused, a rare occurrence. Perhaps this series of actions had even him feeling a bit hot-blooded, and suddenly being mocked with words like childish caught him off guard. Are you still being stubborn, 001? You were never my opponent, not from the beginning to the end. But always acting so sure of victory, it's disgusting. Its tens of thousands of tentacles whistled towards Yilan, and the entire dynasty began to act like a prison, layer upon layer, enveloping Yilan in its center. Submit. In an instant, the entire radiant city erupted with rule-level power. Yilan stood in mid-air, yet he seemed to be bound in the very center by an infinite, invisible force. Like the rolling tide of fate, there was nowhere to hide. Like a soul, it had lost its sanctuary. Yilan's expression subtly changed. What was difficult wasn't clashing head-on with such power, but in that very moment, he actually felt his own power fading. It was fading rapidly and irreversibly, and even Yilan didn't know where the power was going. It was as if he was about to directly turn into an ordinary person. Fight back. 001. Ancient god's touch, certain of victory, even began to clamor, I haven't even used my full power yet. Yilan's mouth twitched slightly. What are you barking about? Did Li Jixin infect you? Narrowing his eyes, Yilan took a deep breath. The power of rules? Competing with the same type of power. I am the origin. Yilan's eyes grew increasingly profound, and a screen of vague power appeared, suspending Yilan's last remaining strength. I am a guest of hometown, enjoying the peace of the soul. Sunshine, beaches, birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. A vague scene appeared like a scroll, forcibly overlapping with the dynasty. In that instant, Yilan seemed to find his suddenly vanished power. His gaze was sharp, and a more abundant power replenished him. Hometown? Ancient god's touch pondered, then burst into laughter. Is that the place where you've repeatedly clung to life? Ha 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 ha. You've already lost half the battle, you've allowed me to find it. Yilan's emotions remained completely unmoved. He stepped onto the beach in midair, his power surging to destroy the attacking tentacles, and pointed at ancient god's touch. I reside in hometown, the guardian of the wasteland and civilization. And the dynasty, and you, do not belong here. Yilan stared at him, exuding an increasingly surging aura. You are not worthy of being called the Lord of the World, yet you created a false world like the dynasty, reigning supreme. You are just a false lord of the world. Boom! It seemed as if the power of the soul began to erupt.
The dynasty and hometown stood in opposition, neither able to encroach upon the other in the slightest.
We are both guests.
Yi Lan's voice vibrated, and his power erupted once again, suppressing the rules to a level that belonged to no one. Both the dynasty and hometown gradually began to become transparent and dissipate.
Boom! Ancient God's Touch's strange power began to retract, and it pouted slightly. How boring, 001, it's always like this, every time.
Our power attributes are so similar, we fight and fight, and in the end, it always comes down to a stalemate.
But this time, it revealed a strange smile. You haven't realized what's special about the dynasty yet. It's not that I like the dynasty, or like ruling the world, but the dynasty created by the Li family will make my soul power more compatible with this world. When I reintegrate with the parts one gave them, when I merge with the dynasty and reclaim the power they enhanced for me, I will shatter the balance between us.
Yi Lan thought for a moment, then finally smiled faintly.
Thank you for the explanation, I figured out many more things.
Yi Lan looked at the sky and sighed.
It seems you've really pushed me to the brink. Compared to what I've done, you could even be called conservative. Ancient God's Touch?
You strengthen yourself, I strengthen myself, in the end, it's always a perpetual draw.
Yi Lan casually extended his hand and pulled out 2 crystalline fragments.
Why don't you see what these are? Ancient God's Touch's gaze immediately sharpened, then for a moment, it was genuinely startled.
Aren't these fragments of my soul power? This is? How could they be in your hands? This? Boom!
Yi Lan held the fragments that had fallen beside Li Zichuan upon his death in his palm.
The fragments gradually transformed into a crystalline glow, injecting into Yi Lan's body.
In an instant, Yi Lan's body flickered between light and dark. Enduring the intense pain in his soul, Yi Lan opened his eyes. On Yi Lan's palm, the strange tentacle patterns that Ancient God's Touch had once slightly encroached upon spread a little further.
The dynasty will be a part of Radiant City, operating according to Radiant City's rules.
Yi Lan waved his hand. In the Radiant City that had transformed into the dynasty, people were no longer confined in groups, but once again dispersed everywhere. The wisps of thread that seemed to be drawing something from these people also ceased their transmission to the sky with Yi Lan's wave of his hand. Yi Lan revealed a smile, repeating Ancient God's Touch's words.
I am the heart of the dynasty, I am the Lord of Souls. Boom! A blazing psionic storm swept through the dynasty, and Yi Lan became its eye.
For the first time, Yi Lan contended for the authority that belonged to Ancient God's Touch.
And the dynasty was merely a byproduct of this battle, a crucial advantageous factor. Submit. No. A vast consciousness pressed into Ancient God's Touch's central nervous system.
It roared wildly, a hint of panic in its voice, growing louder and louder, as if only by doing so could it counteract the weakening of itself.
How is this possible? How can you absorb my power? No. You want to permanently usurp my power type? No. How could you possibly do that? He suddenly froze, realizing something. Radiant City's research. You damn old schemer.
Without time to curse any further, it frantically ascended, creating distance between itself and Yi Lan again.
I am an ancient god of the starry sky, I am the most ancient deity. I am the beginning of all things, I am the source of pollution, the infinitely spreading harvester. I am the Lord of Devour. It roared enchanted, its body stabilizing considerably as it did so. My servants. Spread my power. Pollute them. Then devour them.
Bai Zhuahai stiffened all over, his entire being seemed to lose consciousness in an instant, and he slowly ascended into the air. The next moment, all of the Bai family's gene enhancers slowly ascended into the air. You took the substance of evil. Then go spread my pollution, carry my will. Devour everything. Devour? Yi Lan frowned slightly, watching quietly. Hundreds of gene enhancers brought forth a sky-obscuring black mist, which in the blink of an eye covered the entire Radiant City, transforming it into a ghost city like countless specters. The black mist continuously passed through the residents of Radiant City, then lingered there, as if injecting some anchor point.
Devour. Hundreds of gene enhancers hovered in mid-air, as if forming a sky-obscuring immortal slaying array, absorbing the black mist throughout the city. As if they were devouring the entire Radiant City. They weren't just able to devour anomalies like Yilan, but were devouring everything. The devoured power caused these gene enhancers' entire bodies to become grotesque, giving them a feeling of exploding and dying at any moment. Finally, this power began to converge on Ancient God's touch, restoring its power to its peak. This is the difference. Ancient God's touch roared. Do you think you've won by usurping my soul power in the dynasty? The Bai family's research allows me to truly devour your power. This era where neither of us can completely kill the other will change from now on. Yilan felt his power being devoured, observed the scene for a few more seconds, and then smiled faintly. You are indeed formidable, no wonder I've lost to you before. Our powers are very similar, but you can disregard everything, resorting to any means necessary. So? Yilan murmured. Thank you for your explanation, I've figured out what I'm truly planning again. It turns out my real intention was to go crazy with you. Snap. A snap of fingers echoed in the sky, filling black clouds. White light flashed, and 2 vials of serum appeared in Yilan's hands. Ancient God's touch's gaze immediately sharpened. What? My.